a rope. We'll get them back.
Okay,
Okay.
we're on.
All right, we'll open up the meeting. You got the roll call, Judy?
Yes, Ms. Christie?
Here.
Mr. Delius?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. Zepnick?
Here.
Mr. DiGiovanni is recusing.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Travaglini?
Here.
Ms. Petrus? And Chairman Cutchin?
Here.
Thank you. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Burnasville News and to the Courier News. Also to all subscribers and posted here at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, as of January 11th, 2019.
Please stand for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't see our applicant here. Yeah. Okay, we have light things. I'll open it up to the public if there's anything that anyone would like to talk about that's not on the agenda. Come forward. Seeing no one, we'll close that part of the public hearing. And we're right into our applicant. So, Mr. Lear.
Perfect timing.
That's called perfect timing. You're up. We're starting. I know you're looking at me, but waiting for Mr. Lear. He's coming.
I'm very sorry, just confirming with my client myself. My name is Jeff Lehrer. Just a reminder, from Boston, people in Cecil Bacon in Warren, New Jersey. We were here on August 9th in connection with the application of Lee Properties at Bedminster LLC, presenting an application for 4,000 retail as well as 40 apartment units. We're here this evening. I don't have my engineer this evening, so I'm going to be presenting the architect, and I'm going to be presenting, if we can get to that point, the traffic consultant. So I'd like to start with architecture.
That's fine, but you are going to bring Mr. Dworsky back.
He will be back. We know that there are some
Okay.
questions
Yes,
about
okay.
stormwater, and some tree replacement issues, so we will definitely have him back.
Okay, all right, very good.
Mr. Serrano. Mr. Serrano, can you
Speaking sworn, stand and raise your right hand, please. You swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Could you state your full name for the truth, please, and spell the last name?
John Serrato, Sarracco.
I assume you're going to qualify, Mr. Lara.
Well, I'm going to have him qualify to the extent that Mr. Galvin wants to voir dire his qualifications. That's certainly possible, but I provide the board with the benefit of your educational and professional background, please.
Sure. Graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic in 1981 with a Bachelor of Buildings and Bachelor of Architecture. Got licensed in New Jersey in '85 and a couple of other states a year or two after that. I've been actively practicing for 20 years independently. I've been in front of boards throughout New Jersey, most recently Warren, Watchung, Newark, Lakewood, a bunch of times.
And so you have testified before, and you're a New Jersey certified architect, correct?
Yes.
Now, the application as an architect have been accepted by the board, and limited to testify as such.
I think so.
Any issues?
No, no issues. Dennis Galvin appearing in objection, and we have no problem with this witness.
Thank you. Mhm.
Mr. Sirocco, did you prepare supervise the preparation of the floor plans and renderings that have been submitted to this board?
Yes, I have.
And what I would like you to do is start by describing, from an architectural perspective, obviously, the two buildings and the specific design elements that have been used. Sure.
You can use that microphone. I'm just going to move this up.
First of all, this is probably as good a location as any other.
I think so. I think so.
If you don't mind me, I'll be
I'll get out of here.
behind you.
But has this been submitted with the application?
No, it hasn't.
All right, then you should mark these as exhibits, please.
Dave, I think it's A3 is the next number.
Okay, Mark, whichever one you're going to do first, A3 with today's date.
But this is a rendering looking from Lamington Road of the west building or portion of the east building. I'm calling this A3. 12. Want me to go through all the exhibits?
Yes.
This is a similar view, except it shows both buildings with the full extent of both buildings. This would be A4. I have the, Jeff, I have those other drawings that we prepared the other day, so I'll hold off on those. Okay. I would like to just refer to the civil engineer's site plan for a minute.
And that was already marked as A2.
A2.
Right, so this was presented last month. Just to give you an understanding, design this site. We went through a lot of different exercises to determine what would be the best layout from both from a planning point of view, from a architectural point of view, and also from the point of view of respecting the properties around us. And we ultimately came up with this solution, which has the two buildings, two residential buildings, the west building with retail on the ground floor close to and parallel to Lamington Road. We're leaving the whole back of the site empty. We went through considerable design and expense to get the parking laid out behind the buildings. So there's no surface parking visible from Lamington Road, and we also developed a nice courtyard, a public courtyard between the two buildings. We feel that this site plan gave very clear definition to the development of the central district of the town. At the same time, as I said, it gives the most respect to the existing landscaping and the existing neighborhood in the back.
You're now referring to the floor plans, which are part of the plans that you submitted, correct?
Yes. So on the cover page, PB 100, I'll just go through the summaries a little bit. The rendering on PB 100 is the same rendering as Exhibit 3. And as you can see, we have a use summary on the bottom of the PB 100, and we broke the summary down between the west building and the east building.
The west building, and I'll walk you through the plans, has 22 residential units with 21 parking spaces in the garage, indoor parking spaces. The east building, and it also has 4,000 square feet of retail. The east building has no retail, it has 35 interior parking spaces and 18 residential units. So the overall project has 40 residential units, of which 6 are affordable units, 4,000 square feet of retail, and 56 interior parking spaces for the use of the residents of the apartments. So when we go to PB 200, I won't put exhibit numbers on these. These are okay. So this is on the top of the page, we have the ground floor of the west building. We have a retail, the 4,000 square foot retail that has windows and doors opening to Lamington Road, also has windows and doors opening to the courtyard between the two buildings. On the back side of the retail, facing the hill, we have the residential lobby, elevator, stairs taking up to the residential floors upstairs. In both buildings, the residential entrance lobby is on the back side of the building. On the west side of this ground floor, we have the 21-car parking garage, we have bicycle storage, mechanical rooms. And just to go back to the rendering a little bit. So that ground floor is represented in A3, where we have the retail that faces both Lamington Road and the public courtyard. The residential lobby entrances in the back off our cul-de-sac. And this portion here, as the grade comes up, this is the parking that's buried in the hill on the ground floor. Also on the ground floor, we have the trash room. I'll show up. We have trash chutes from each floor. The trash will, the tenants will put the trash into these trash chutes, and we come down to a trash room that's within the building. And then on 2 to 3 times a week, the super of the building would bring the trash out for garbage pickup. And the retail has an outdoor trash container that the civil engineer spoke about. When we get up to the first floor, this becomes a totally residential floor. And we show the interior of all the units. Basically, we have mostly 2-bedroom units with some 1-bedroom units. A typical 2-bedroom unit will have 2 full baths. It has a washer dryer. Well, all the units have washer dryers, their own hot water system, their own heating and air conditioning for individual control. And many of the units have balconies, but not all of them, but many of them. When we go up to the second floor, it's just a similar layout to the first floor, except when I get into the elevations, you'll see, because of the architectural articulations we're doing with the building, some of the street-facing units don't have balconies. The roof, I'll go through the roof lines, but the roof plan on PB 201 shows a traditional residential type of pitched roof, an asphalt shingle pitched roof. I should just point out, if we look at the garage, if we look at the ground floor plan on PB 200, we did locate some exterior HVAC condenser units. And typically, many of the units have what we call Magic Pack HVAC units. These are self-contained heating and air conditioning units within the unit on an exterior wall that have a louver. We went out of our way to make sure that we have no louvers on the apartments facing Lamington Road. Because there are no louvers, we need little compressors to address their air conditioning system. So those are buried in a little corner here. The landscape, there'll be landscaping around it. Those will never be seen from Lamington Road.
So those units are high efficiency.
These are self-contained.
Okay, so we have two types of units. The Magic Hat units, the ones that are fully contained within the unit, that only have a louver to the outside, those are never heard from the outside. The tenants will hear them when the fan kicks off, but you won't hear them from the outside. These compressors are like residential air conditioning compressors that you typically have around your house, depending on the condition of them. Some make very little noise, some make more noise as they get older, depending on maintenance and things like that. But again, we kind of tuck them in little corners. We have one on this side, we have three on this side. And considering the distance that the civil engineer spoke about between our buildings and their single-family homes on top of the hill, these will never be heard up the hill.
On the split systems, there's a fan unit ceiling mounted or surface mounted in the spaces? How does that work?
Right. So in the split systems where we don't have a louver through the wall, because we wanted to make sure there's nothing on Lamington Road, we have an air handler within the unit. So if you look at, the two-bedroom, that I'm pointing to, you'll see an HVAC unit next to the washer-dryer, and that has a fan in it. It'll duct the...
So it's ducted to the various rooms?
Ducted to the various rooms, and there'll just be a refrigerant line going to the compressor outside.
And for the self-contained units,
Those are
the heat
ducted
is
system.
stacked through the roof?
No, so for the self-contained units, what we call the Magic Hats, there's both heating, there'll be gas going to those units.
And that's just the louvers outside?
Just the louvers outside to get, and then again, those are ducted systems. So these are very high-quality HVAC systems in the sense that the air is pushed around throughout the unit. It's very good quality, and most importantly, every tenant has complete individual control of their heating and air conditioning throughout the year.
Why don't you move on to the next building?
Right. Well, I think I should maybe just walk through the elevations of this building. So this is a black and white, a two-dimensional of the rendering. And then as you can see, we have the retail on the ground floor. We have these nice broad porches with wood railings and copper roofs sweeping across the first floor, interrupted by brick elements. And then we have all stone below the porches. And then the first and second floor is hardy plank siding, a very good quality siding, and the asphalt shingle roof up above. This pitch here represents the pitch of Lamington Road coming up. So the ground floor is exposed at the our little public courtyard here. And then the parking garage is kind of buried in this hill here. This is the elevation facing the public courtyard. So again, we have the retail at the ground floor that opens up to the public courtyard. We have the two residential floors above. These, now we begin to see these louvers, these HVAC louvers, and we have again, we have more porches on that side.
That's a full brick face, or a full brick, or is it just brick face?
Right, so this, all the brick we indicate here is a true 4-inch brick.
And the stone?
And the stone is an applied stone. It's a artificial stone that gets applied to the. I should point out, you bring up some good points, that we did present to the landmarks, to the Historic Commission. And I should point out that, I mean, it's my interpretation that they were very pleased with our presentation. But I hear that all the time, but I don't know. But I got the impression they were very happy with it. There was a lot of discussion on the roof lines. They were very happy with the roof lines. There was one of the members felt we should do more articulation of the roof lines than what we showed, and the other board members felt that a simple roof line with the interruption of these reverse gables was a nice, very clean element. So there was discussion with that. They were very happy with the use of materials. They felt it was very appropriate for the town. And they did insist that the shed roof above this long porch is a true copper roof, which we agreed to.
And the louvers are like a shingle, almost?
The HVAC louvers?
Yeah.
They're a metal louver. They're about like this height.
Oh, they're metal louvers, they're not detailed like a shingle to
No.
fake you out. or
We
anything.
just paint them the color of the
Okay.
siding, and they kind of blend in.
All right.
They really
Like a shutter.
don't stick out. On the, this is the west side of the west building. So the hill is coming all the way up at this point, which means the parking is totally buried. And this is facing the bank or whatever's next door there, the the bank over there. This is the back of the building facing the hill coming up. And here you can see the residential entrance. And you can see the louvers, and again, we did reverse gables. We didn't put brick in the back. We didn't want to make it too imposing. We kept it a more residential feel in the back on the sides by not bringing in the, strong, heavy materials. When we get to the east building, so the west, because of Lamington Road coming up, the first and second residential floors start a little bit above grade at the high point. The hill comes down, and that allows us to have the exposed retail on the ground floor. When we get to this building, this residential first floor is a little bit more than a floor lower than this residential floor. The building, this building steps down a little bit more than a floor from this floor. And again, as the hill comes down, that allowed us an opening to get the parking entrance in at the low end of the site. So this reads as a two-story building on this side, three-story building on this side with the retail. This reads as two-story on this side as the hill comes down. We get the three-story look where the parking entrance comes in. So when you look at the ground floor plan, you'll see we have no retail. We were able to get more cars. This is that parking entrance off of Lamington Road. You come off
I
of
cannot see what you are trying to point out.
Okay.
This way.
So
Please stand on the other side.
why don't I just go to the site plan real quick?
Thank you.
The building, the parking, the west building that I just spoke about, the parking is coming in off our cul-de-sac. It's coming in from the back of the building. Okay, on the east building, the parking entrance, again, is at the low end of the building, and it's right off of Lamington Road. So this is Lamington Road here. You make a turn into our driveway, and after 50 feet or so, you make a left turn into the garage parking underneath.
Anyone that can't see is welcome to come up further, there's seats up front. There's a lot of empty seats.
Gentlemen can stand on the other side.
Do you want us to move it that way a little bit?
Yes.
Well, then the board can't do it.
Is that a little bit better?
Well,
Then
then the
we
board
can't see.
can't see.
Board can't see
Who
it.
does the voting?
Then we,
Okay.
No, but there's plenty of
Yeah.
seats up front,
Yeah.
so people can move up if they want.
Okay, so just going through the ground floor quickly, so this is the parking garage entrance. This part of the ground floor is buried in the hill. There are no windows there, nothing there. We have a bigger garage. We have an elevator from the parking garage.
If you use a laser pointer, you can sit in your chair here.
I don't
And
typically
everybody can see what's
use
going on.
them, but, okay, so we have the,
Come all the way over here.
okay.
That will reach all the way across the room.
amazing motion.
We have an elevator in both garages to take the residents from the parking spaces up to the residential floors, a bicycle room, mechanical rooms, and again, we have one of the trash rooms with a trash. When we get to the first floor, this portion of the building is open to the public courtyard between the two buildings. And off of that space there, with these large windows there, we have the residential lobby that's open to the back of the building. And we put our amenity spaces, an activity room, a gymnasium, possibly a yoga type room. So we have all the amenity spaces at the first floor here facing Lavington Road and opening up to one of the large porches. The rest of the first floor is all residential, and the second floor is just very similar to the second floor of the other building. So, the materials are very similar to the other building. They're basically mirrors of each other. Right, okay, so,
So John, are all the residential units in rentals, correct?
yes.
And what is the breakdown on the number of market rate units and affordable units?
We have 6, of the 40 units, 6 of them are affordable units.
So 34 are market.
Yes.
All right, and the affordable units will meet the bedroom distribution breakdown that's required by UPAC, Uniform Housing Affordability Control Regulations.
Yes, we have 1 one-bedroom, 3 two-bedrooms, and 2 three-bedroom units, affordable units.
All right, in terms of market rate rental units, what's the breakdown of 1-bedroom versus 2-bedroom units?
It's roughly, we have 8 one-bedrooms and 26 two-bedrooms.
And what is the average size of the units?
The one-bedrooms average about 750, maybe 800 square feet, not including the porch. That's paint-to-paint dimensions, the interior. Those are comfortable, very comfortable one-bedroom units. Most of them have porches, not all of them, which aren't included in the square footage. The two-bedrooms average from about 10,050 square feet up to 1,200 square feet.
You mean 1,050, not 10,000.
Yeah. Rent's going up on that.
In terms of the knee wall that you referenced in your rendering, do you believe that that knee wall adds to the visual character of the area?
Yes, we looked at the town carefully, and we saw some recurring elements, architectural recurring elements throughout the town. And one of them is the porches. This town has a very casual feel to it because of the nature of all the porches. Just about every building in this town has a pitched roof, whether it's commercial or residential. There's pitched roofs. The materials, brick, clapboard siding, which we're using hardy plank siding, and of course the stone walls. We see them all over town.
And you and the engineer worked very closely to ensure that the buildings were placed as close to Lavington as possible and away from the slope, correct?
That was a priority.
Getting to that issue, can you discuss the height of buildings and their proximity to the roadway?
Sure. So, I think maybe I should just give a little explanation as to how the town defines the height of the building. That's important. We have a highly contoured site. Nothing splat on it, it's pitching. Sure. We have a highly contoured site. Unfortunately, the way the town works the definition of the height of the building is you take the average grade along the front of the building to define the average grade used to establish what the height of the building is. So unfortunately, because the back of the building is at the high part of our site, of our buildings, we are coming into this application handicapped in the sense that the average grade is taken from the worst part of the site from a height perspective, meaning the low point. So on sheet 6 of the civil drawings, the civil engineer did a calculation, and I just really walked through this since it's a variance request. Basically what he did, if you look on sheet 6, he took a point every 10 feet along the front of the building. Equals .1 feet. So west building equals .101, .103, and he puts the proposed grade at that point. So every 10 feet, then he adds those up and he takes an average of that grade in the front. He did the same thing with the west building. So what happens is we end up with 2 average grades, one for each building, and our building height is measured from that average grade.
What's the number you're using for the average grade?
So for the west building or building number 1, the average grade is 190 feet. Architecturally, it's 190 feet 3 inches, which is on. So if you look at, let me refer you to drawing. So if you look at drawing PB 202, my drawing PB 202.
Your drawing.
Yeah, my drawing PB 202.
Oh, put that one away. There's tables on this 6 though. You don't have 6?
There were tables.
On the site plan, on the civil drawings, there's tables.
Yeah, those tables are showing how we calculate the average grade. So I took the average grade from the civil drawing.
So building says the average grade is 182. Am I reading that right?
Well, that's for the other building.
Well, building 2 is the west building.
Yeah.
Okay, so 190 is the west, and then the 239 is your peak.
Right, so when you look at PB 202, my drawing, and you look at the south elevation at the top, to the right of the building, I show the average grade at 190 feet 3 inches, right? And then the height of the building, which is measured in this town to the ridge of the roof, is 49 feet 6 inches.
Is that the average or is that the highest one?
Now, the average grade, by the definition of this town, is measured at the front of the building, the average grade at the front of the building. If it was measured from the back of the building, our height variance would be a lot less severe than what it is. So measuring from the average grade as calculated by the civil engineer, the height of the west building is 49 feet 6 inches, which I indicate on PB 202. When you go to the east building, and you look at PB 302, this building's a little shorter. I've got the average grade of 191 inches from the civil engineer, and to the ridge is 43 feet. So
Okay, those are the averages. Can you tell me what is the highest point of the building?
Those are the
Yes,
maximum.
that's the highest, no, no, so in the east building, the 43 feet is the high, is from the average grade.
From the average grade to the
To
high
the high-
point of the ridge?
Of the
Yeah.
ridge.
The 42,
Is the 43 feet.
43.
Okay, so as we were working through preparing drawings to get us to this point, we go through a lot of different schemes, site plans, elevations, what it looks like. And one of the things we looked at is possibly doing flat roofs. And we did a study with the flat roof, and I don't know if I should pass that around. So this is
When you pass it around, it should be marked as an exhibit. The A5.
A5. Okay, so this exhibit, on the first page, I'm calling PD 304. And with this, what I did here was I put a comparison of a pitch-proof building, which we're proposing, we're asking approval for, on the left side, and on the right side is a very simplistic section showing if we had a flat roof. And the whole purpose of, this is only a study, we're not asking for this. The whole purpose of this is to show that if you kept the floor-to-floor height the same height, meaning we had a very nice, we had like a 10, 11 foot roof tail high ceiling, we have 9 foot high ceilings in the apartments, and very, very generous ceiling height. If we kept those ceiling heights exactly the same, kept the site plan exactly the same, kept the building layouts exactly the same, and put a flat roof, we wouldn't need a height variance for either building.
Did you review this proposal with the historic architectural review people?
No, we don't like the building. We feel that-
You don't like the building either.
Can't say my opinion. So this is, if you look at the second page of what I handed out, you see a 3D rendering of flat building. We just don't feel it's in character with the town.
Well, that was really my question. Do you think that with a flat roof is in character with what is envisioned for DM zone district?
Absolutely not. We didn't feel it was, we didn't feel we should even present it formally to the town. We just want to show you a study that we did to show you that this project could happen without a height variance. The exact same unit count, same affordable housing, yes, same parking, everything. But we prefer the pitched roof. We feel it's more in character, and I think the planner, who Jeff will talk about, will go into more detail as to how.
Can you discuss a little bit about the site plan itself? Why the buildings can't be lowered? You know, why do they need to start off that high? You know, why?
Right.
Can you dig more disturb more of the soil? I understand that, in order to lower them because those are going to be very high in comparison to the rest of the street.
Right. So if you could picture this, if we, well, before I answer the question, if you don't mind, the cul-de-sac, the driveway of the last house on that cul-de-sac on top of the hill, that driveway is elevation 216, sea level 216. Our roof pitch, our ridges for the two pitched roofs, one is 224 elevation, so it's maybe 8 feet high or 9 feet higher than that cul-de-sac. And the other one, the higher building, the building on the west,
is elevation 239, 240, let's say. So that's about 14 feet higher. The ridge is about 14. Just to give you a sense of,
Do you have a retaining wall in the back of the parking lot?
yes.
Referencing A2.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a reference point between this driveway and the ridge of these roofs. That's, I should just get that out there. If we lower these two buildings, what happens is, everything would have to get lowered. So the rear ground floor first floor apartments have windows, people can walk into the building, we don't have 10 feet difference between the parking lot and the lobby, which creates all kinds of nightmares. So if we drop this, we would have these humongous retaining walls here. It would just be, it would be 20, plus 20 feet of retaining walls, which we thought was really inappropriate. We're working that stone wall in the front that helps us with the character of the town. So we believe we found a happy medium between working with the severely contoured nature of the site and dealing with the height issue.
What is the height of the retaining wall behind the parking lot?
It's a civil engineer thing, but it was a two-tiered wall, and I believe it was like 4 feet, 6 feet. If we lower the build, so that's 10 feet tall, that's that, total is 100 feet. If we dropped our building down, you know, supposedly those walls just become massive wall, and it's just a lot of disturbance to the site in general.
So, just to return, this applicant can comply based upon A5, but you don't recommend it for architectural reasons, for the reasons that we discussed, right?
Correct.
Turning to the finishes of the units, what are some of the more high-end finishes that are being used inside the units that would make them attractive to the residents?
All of the buildings I've done to the lead, they were all well-detailed, well-built buildings. There's a lot of trim. You know, just to give you one example, the corridor doors are recessed in their own little niche to give a little character. Kitchens are all granite kitchen tops. It's just very good quality trim work and detail.
Wood floors as well?
Yes.
Can we back up a second? Excuse me. Kathy was asking a question about pushing this down.
Yeah.
At the western end of both buildings,
Yes.
your parking garage is basically buried right now, correct?
Yes.
So that first floor is just above ground level at that point?
Yes, like a foot or two above ground level. Yeah.
So if we push it down anymore, we're...
Yeah, well, then what would happen is then this whole parking lot would have to be lowered. These grades are pretty much close to natural grades. All of these would have to be lowered, and we would just have this incredible retaining wall going across the whole site.
Did you make any, when you decided to put as many parkings, it almost seems like you traded off some of the height encroachment, some of the lot coverage for the height. So if you didn't bury all of that parking and you did more surface parking, you might have a coverage issue, but you may not have as much of a height issue. Did you do any, you did this study for this alternate roof line, but did you do any studies about doing more coverage and less parking underneath?
Right, so that raises a couple of issues. Number one is that Elite's approach to their market rate of rental buildings is to always have at least one-to-one parking in the basements with an elevator. So every apartment has a car in the garage, take an elevator down. So that's one thing driving this. The other thing too is that we really were trying to avoid disturbing more of this site, you know, the whole tree aspect, respecting the single-family homes on top of the hill. The more surface parking you put, you know, the less green the site is. It's as simple as that. We have the footprint of the building anyway. If there's parking or not, we have the footprint. So it is an expense to put the parking below grade, below the first floor. It isn't cheap. You have to put steel up. But it allows Elite to market these buildings to a class of tenants that they're very happy with. So
So two reasons. It makes the buildings more marketable by being able to cover those, as many parking spots as you did. But it also minimizes the disturbance and the encroachment on the lot.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, when we submitted these plans, in the west building, we have 22 apartments and we have 21 parking spaces in the garage. I kind of missed that, but we found a way to get a 22nd car in that parking garage. So if we do get past these hearings and we have to submit, Pine Storms would be showing 22 cars in that west parking.
Mr. Slotkin, you were here during the last hearing, were you not?
Yes.
And you're fairly familiar with the operations of the rental buildings by these buildings, correct?
Yes.
And that's because you've been working with them for many years.
Yes.
One of the questions asked at the last meeting is how many people will be moving in and out of the building, or how do those operations occur? You're very familiar with that because of how long you've been working with the client. Maybe you can just expand upon that?
Yeah, so typically, a building of this size, we probably have, both buildings altogether, 40 units, you probably have 1 to 2. After the initial fill-up of the apartments getting filled up, once it's stabilized at, 90-95%, you'll have maybe 1 or 2 move-ins a month. And typically, it's a box truck. As the civil engineer pointed out, the cul-de-sac isn't set up for a tractor trailer, for a tandem. It's not set up for that, for a tractor trailer movement. And the Elite has the ability to impose to the tenants that they have to move in with a box truck.
So they can put in their leases that they can't use tractor trailers to access that site for moving in. How about retail deliveries? Where do they normally take place?
Again, these are small, it's 4,000 square feet. It could be one larger retail. It could be 2 smaller retail units. It's a little difficult to talk about without knowing exactly what the retail is, but typically, these are Main Street type of retail deliveries without a loading dock, without tractor trailer deliveries. Again, box trucks will most likely be source of deliveries.
Can you confirm, this was a question asked last time, that there will be no guest parking in the below-ground parking areas?
Yeah, the below ground is assigned parking. They'll have a fob card to get into the parking garage, and the guest parking will be in surface parking.
One last question. At the last hearing, someone asked how access from the building number 1 to which is the easterly building, to the outdoor grilling area will occur, and it was discussed that they actually will walk through the westerly building to access that area, correct?
Right, so this is the outdoor recreation area. There is a path from this outdoor area to a back door leading to the public corridor of the first floor. Tenants in this building have no problem just walking in. Tenants in this building will have to come out of the residential lobby here, walk down the sidewalk around the cul-de-sac, go into the residential end lobby here, walk down the corridor, and then go to the outdoor recreation. There is a grade difference here. There is a retaining wall here. so they would have to go through the building.
Madam Chair, I have nothing further for you.
Okay, any of the board? Rich?
And this may more be for our planner. You referenced some sort of housing standard before when you described the mix of the size of the apartments. So you are therefore required to have a three-bedroom?
Yes, on the affordable units. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with it. I think the planner can speak better to it, but we do have an obligation to provide a certain mix of apartments.
It's the uniform housing.
So it's just we may want to limit the size of some of these apartments? We don't have the ability to do that?
What is proposed before the board is an inclusionary housing development. So they're proposing to build not just the market units, but the standard set aside of affordable units that goes with rental housing, which is 15%. And when they do that, they're required to stratify the apartment mix so that there are no more than 20% one bedrooms and at least 20% three bedrooms. So of their 6, 20% three bedrooms is the reason you're seeing 2 3 bedrooms. They want more 2 bedrooms in the middle, and they've got a 1 bedroom, as I heard it described. So yes, they're completely conforming with that, but you have to recognize that this is a use variance that's coming to you not as a request to build 40 market rate apartments, but as a request to build something that pretty much carries its own weight from an affordable housing point of view. And that's part of your evaluation.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else on the board?
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this, I think this is for the architect. What was the thought process behind the layout of the spaces, particularly the retail, being in the west building as opposed to the east building, which would be closer to more of your parking?
We like the, well, we're dealing with the contours of the site. We absolutely did not want the retail on a residential floor. That gives height differences between retail where this will create all kinds of problems. So because the site comes down, that little pocket where the site comes down is just an excellent place to put the retail. Upstairs, we have barren walls, structurally it's very different. And also, we just thought the courtyard, that public courtyard, just lends itself. On one side, we have the retail, on the other side, we have the amenity spaces for the market rate, for all the tenants. The amenities for all the tenants, that courtyard becomes a lively spot.
And one other quick question. Is it possible to put some kind of a walkway along the back of the west building to avoid people from having to go through the building to go to that grilling area?
No, the grade pond
It's right behind the building? Are you going to have issues with drainage because of that?
I'll defer to the civil engineer.
Okay, all right.
But we, as I said, we really went out of our way to not slice and dice this site more than we have.
Right, so I think that's going to be an issue when people are trapped through the building to get to that. So, anyway, all right.
Paul?
Madam Chair, I did have a couple of questions, and maybe some of these will have to be answered by the site engineer, but I'd like your thoughts on them as well. And they relate to the utility service, because as these things come in, is it your anticipation that there are going to be separate electric, gas, and water meters for each of the units? And if so, where would they be?
There won't be water, there won't be separate metering. The land will be one meter for both buildings, and that the landlord will address. On the gas, typically what happens is there'll be gas meters, banks of gas meters, maybe 6, 8, 10 gas meters spread out, probably around the back of the building. Hopefully, if the utility company works with us, we'll get them in the back of the building. And the tenants pay for their gas. On the electric, we'll have probably 45 or so meters, 40 tenants, maybe 2 or 3 retail tenants, and then the house meters. And we will have an electric, what we call the mechanical rooms. But as we get further into the structure drawings will define a electrical room here and electrical room there, so we don't foresee any electrical service outside of the building. It will be inside, all the meters will be inside.
So the electric meters will be inside, the gas will be outside?
Yes.
And I think
And
you
then
said,
the water will be inside, there'll be a water room inside.
and I think you said if the utility company works with you, I think my recommendation would be to the board that there be a requirement that the gas meters be on the back of the building. That's, I don't frankly think that's all that negotiable. Another question I have is something that we've recently started to run into, which is very problematic, and it's the water company requirement for what they call hot boxes. Are you familiar with what they are?
I'm not a mechanical engineer.
Okay, it's, the water company is now apparently requiring a hot box, which is an above-ground enclosure in front of the site, near the property line, that in the case of a building like this, would probably be 4 or 5 feet wide, 5 or 6 feet high, and 10 or 12 feet long. Stainless steel box in front of the site where the metering and backflow occurs with a heating element inside of it.
We'll be putting that inside the building.
Yeah.
That will go inside. That's what projects we recently completed. We haven't presented this project to the utility companies yet, obviously, so we don't know, but the last few projects that we've done, this never came up. I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying that.
Well, it's come up in a couple of applications that I'm familiar with in this town and in this area, and it's highly problematic. And I would request that maybe you work with your civil engineer before the next meeting and try to figure that out.
Yes. I will say that we have plenty of space, unlike some projects, we have plenty of space around this building. If they do impose that on us, we have plenty of room to landscape around it, so I'm sure we can do something.
And they do have landscaping requirements around this, so please investigate it. The other question I have is if you have a master water meter, the sewer bills are based on water usage. So is there one sewer bill for the entire building, or will each apartment have its own bill?
No, it's the landlord takes care of it.
So the rent basically includes water and sewer?
Yes.
All right, I'll open it up to the public for any questions or comments. You want to come first? Yes. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, can I read you?
John Storm.
All right, Mr. Shaw. You said that this building design is similar to other buildings in the area?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was there are elements of our building that are similar to elements in other buildings.
Okay. So, do you have any pictures of those buildings that you were looking at when you designed this? No. Are there any buildings in town that you can recommend this to? We could take a look.
It was a general visual understanding I had of the town, the nature of the pitched roof, the nature of the siding materials, the basic scaling of the buildings. It was a general impression I had. I didn't focus on one particular building.
And how much is Bedminster like Maplewood?
The two very,
Okay. And do you have a project in Maplewood?
I designed several projects in Maplewood.
If I suggested that to you, that a lot of the design elements here seem similar to the Maplewood project, how would you respond to that?
I think you can say that about any building that uses hard to find pitched roofs and balconies. The scaling of those buildings is tremendously different than the character and scaling of these buildings. So on the level of detail of particular materials stone veneer, hardy plank siding, trim-around windows. Yes, they're going to be similar in terms of the overall feel of the building, scaling, character of the building. I think they're different.
Did the historical commission create a report?
Not at this point.
Is there a copy of the minutes from the historical commission?
I don't have it.
I'll go about trying to find it. You said that the cul-de-sac can't be used by tractor trailers?
I really would defer that to the civil engineer. That's my understanding of the testimony from the civil engineer.
So you acknowledge that there'd be a problem with tractor trailers coming off this
I
site?
defer it to the civil.
Okay, because you were suggesting that you were going to limit it to just box trucks.
Even if the cul-de-sac could accept a tractor trailer, I believe it would be in the police best interest to limit box trucks only.
Same thing with the stone wall we were just talking about. Is there a place, someplace in town that see a stone wall that looks like this?
There's the wonderful stone wall like 2 or 3 blocks down that has flowers cascading off of it right on the ladder to a wonderful wall.
You showed a picture of the flat roof versus the peak roof. So this development can be done without the peak roof?
Yes, the exact program layout could be done with a flat roof.
Okay, and then was any consideration given to doing green elements on a flat roof?
No, we're not considering a flat roof.
Okay.
I should point out that green elements could be done on a picture.
But you're not proposing any of that, is
No.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. So I assume you were given design instructions, correct?
No, it's the process with Elite, we've done many projects together, is a group effort between me, the principals of Elite, their marketing people, and the civil engineer.
But the size of this project is inconsistent with the end zone, right?
That's a planning question that I'm going to ask that our planner deal with and not our architect.
But he was problematically involved with the decision as to what size structure. Wouldn't you have to consider what the zoning is before you design a building?
I'm going to ask that question be answered by our planner.
Can I have a ruling on that? Do you agree?
They need a variance, so I'm not sure what more you're gonna ask them.
I was asking, was he aware that that he came into a project that needed a use variance, a density variance, and a height variance? They're designing a building. They could have designed the building half this size, right? Or
Were you aware?
I'm not sure this is, he's making conclusions, he's making statements. Are you asking questions of the architect? As I told you, is he aware that a variance was required? Yes. It was required that a height variance was required.
I'm trying to figure out why we decided to put a building this size in this location that's inconsistent with the zoning.
That's a question that our planning will answer.
So while the ordinance allows a height of 35 feet, you have 2 buildings at 42.66 and 49.43 feet, right?
Of course.
All right, and how do you justify that significant increase in that?
I tried to explain the awkward way that the town establishes the average grade of the height. This is the first town that I've been in where they only define it from the front of the building. Typically, it's around the entire building. That would have brought our average grade up. That's one issue. I think we're going in with handicaps because of the nature of the contours of this site. That creates very difficult situations to establish height issues, and also the fact that pretty much every structure in this town has a pitched roof. We wanted to continue that
But you
approach.
really don't have a hardship in this case because you could have built a structure that was 35 feet in height.
Mr. Galvin is making a conclusion about planning testimony. I would ask that he limit his questioning to architectural questions.
The hardship in the context of the question that you asked
Was
is
not
a
hardship
term of
under
art,
C1.
and within the expertise of a planner. If you want to argue at the appropriate time that there's been no hardship showing made in terms of height variance application, that might be a good argument, but this isn't the right witness.
How about you don't need a height variance here, you can comply with the 35.
He already said that.
I've already said that.
So I can ask the same question twice.
I mean, he's acknowledged that more than once.
I can ask the same question twice.
It's
I'm
been
actually
answered.
setting up the next question.
All right, then move on to the next question, please.
Don't, I would do that to you. So, not after one question. I've been very nice here and have been
Well, there was
very
an
polite.
there was an objection made,
And
and I
you're
was
gonna rule on the
responding to
objection.
it.
I respect that.
Okay.
But I'm going
Move.
to ask the next question, which was, you agree that 35 feet in height, you can comply with that?
We could comply with the height limiting feet.
Good. What is the total permitted floor area for this property?
I'm not prepared with that.
If I told you in the notice it was 29,702, would you want me to tell you?
I have to defer all this to the plan. First of all, that's not a floor area ratio calculation that you just gave me.
No, I said
That's
total
29,000,
permitted,
That's the maximum floor area ratio.
no, it's total permitted floor area, right from your notice. It's a standard, that is.
You're talking about maximum total floor area, not floor area ratio, correct?
I didn't say floor area ratio. I read it, I read the notice.
Okay. All right, so what's your question?
I want to know what the site is, in your notice, it says that your building is going to be 29,702. Got that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and what's the permitted amount of coverage? What's the
What's
permitted-
existing now
What is
is
the permitted amount of floor areas?
what is permitted is 5,000 square feet.
Okay. So my question for the architect is, does that represent six times, almost six
I'm
times what
deferring
is
to all
permitted?
these questions to the plan.
It's actually not an architectural question.
It is the size of the building, and he said he was involved with the decision as to how we make the building.
We're not going to answer the question. It's not a question appropriate for an architect.
So how do you justify, so he's not going to justify the size of the building because he did what he was told to do?
I don't think that's an appropriate question, and I'm not going to ask you to answer it.
He said he was involved with deciding the size of the building and how the project would be laid out. Now you're retreating from that, and you're saying he really wasn't involved with that.
Can I answer that? Sure.
I said I was a part of a team that works together to come up with what this project will do. There were certain elements, stormwater management, I can answer any.
I understand that, I wouldn't ask.
Okay, so when it comes to zoning issues, Elite has retained an excellent professional planner. He will address your questions with much more confidence and accuracy than I could ever do. So I would prefer to defer any planning issues, zoning issues to the planner who will present next month.
Let me ask you about the building that you've designed. Do you think the massing of this building is appropriate in this location?
Yes.
And you can make that, you can take that position even though this size of this buildings are 6 times larger than what's permitted by the zone?
I don't necessarily agree with your premise that it's 6 times larger. I would have to do it. I would defer to the planner, our planner, to tell me what is actually permitted.
Would you agree something is this much larger than what's permitted is probably a substantial mass?
I defer to the planner.
What kind of architectural style is this?
I don't put names on it.
No. Do you have any elements in it? Are there federal elements in this, or?
Again, I really don't. People always try to categorize different elements or styles of buildings. I'm not sure where that gets us. The board, the architectural board, the building, we're very happy with it. Everybody.
What's unique about this?
Nothing unique except that we make sure that it fits in the context of the
And I know that you've gone over the materials. Could you just please repeat the materials?
Yeah, sure. We have.
Could you speak into the microphone?
We have brick veneer, stone veneer, hardy plank, clapboard siding. Wood is some cementitious material, that's like clapboard siding. We have AZAC trim, fascias, soffits. We have copper shed roofs like porches. We have nicely detailed porch railings. We have decorative columns holding up the shed with copper roofs at the porches. We have nice French doors at the retail and at the amenity spaces.
Now, it seems to me that the location of this building is being, trying to keep it closer to Lymington Road. Is there a problem with the topography at the rear of the property?
The entire site has problems.
Is that a steep slope issue?
I'll defer that to civil engineer.
Do you have any electric car charging stations proposed?
We will propose, yeah, we will have.
And are you going to be able to get LEED certification or similar certification?
We're not seeking any LEED certification.
And you're providing 40 apartment units. What kind of amenities are you providing to the tenants?
This thing is, I don't know, it's sort of kind of.
Oh,
Wait a minute, we'll,
Fix it.
Mr. Ayers broke his mic.
As we say in Greek, it's for cop.
My grandmother would know that.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the question?
that's,
Okay.
We have, I'll start from the beginning. Hi, my name is Dennis Galvin, how are you? You have 40 rental units here. What kind of amenities are you providing to tenants?
We'll have a fully fitted out gym. We have an activity room, a large activity room off the public courtyard that will have possibly some pool tables, things like that. We usually put like a bar type arrangement with the TV in there if people want to hang out and watch sporting events together. And then we have a separate room for possibly some exercise training, yoga, or something like that. We also have the bicycle storage. We have generous size lobbies that will have sitting areas in them. And typically, I didn't show it on the plans, but typically Elite will put a dog spa in their buildings.
You're going to do a dog run or a dog spa?
I'm not, not sure, but typically we'll do a dog spot in the building.
I'll talk about the stores. How many square feet is the commercial space?
Retail space is 4,000 square feet.
And how many stores does that represent?
It could be one 4,000 square foot tenant, it could be two 2,000, it could be 3 tenants. It's, the building was laid out in such a way that would give them flexibility to allow for either a single tenant or multiple retail tenants.
And will there be a way to approach the commercial premises from the street, from Lymington?
Yes.
A sidewalk?
A sidewalk, a ramp, and stairs. Or stairs,
And you designed this building, it's totally ADA compliant?
of course.
What about fire suppression systems? Because this is an apartment complex. Does it have sprinklers?
Yes, we're obligated by the building code to meet all required building code standards, and one of those is a sprinkler building, yes.
I'm going to defer to the public now, and then I reserve my right to ask further questions if I need to.
Okay, fine. Anyone else from residents like to come up?
Can I
Please.
interject a question?
Yes, go right ahead, Rich.
Sure.
So at the beginning of your presentation, you made a couple points about context, gabled roofs, building materials, etc. While there may be some reference points in town with respect to some of the styling, the overriding concern I think that most people have is scaling. So in terms of context, where do we find scaling that you're proposing?
We're sitting in right here. Higher building.
I'm not,
Madam Chair, I would appreciate if people didn't yell out from the audience, because I can't concentrate on
I understand.
conversations.
Please, if you have a question, you have the right to come up and ask a question or a comment.
right, so on the, well, I'll just sit here. No, that's fine, just,
Okay.
so we introduced these reverse gables that they're deep, I believe they're 6 feet deep. And those broke up, well, those did two things. Number one, just broke up the long front of the buildings, and they also allowed us to introduce another material in what we thought was a creative way with the reverse gables on it. It was partially that, it was partially the fact that we broke the project up into 2 buildings, and also the fact that the buildings are not in line with each other, they're staggered a little bit, and the fact that they're at different heights. We felt that all that creates a situation where we're addressing the scaling of the town to address the nature of the town.
If you go back to some of the, again, context, if you go back to some of the design cues you took from Main Street, the retaining wall in front of Sims and
Right.
perhaps the church and so forth. So again, some of these things are very contextual, but nowhere on Main Street is there something as long, as wide, or as high as what you're proposing. So with respect to context, scale is an issue for me, and regardless of what the design team considered or was it to consider, et cetera, there's real issues to me with the scaling, and I'm just, how you think that fits in is my point.
I understand your point. I have to defer a little bit to the planner and just the overall context of the project and the number of units and the affordable housing component. We did look at pushing the buildings further back. We thought that created more problems than anything else. To break the buildings up into more than 2 buildings and leave the unit count the way it is creates other problems. It's basically more trees coming down. It's just more building coverage, so we just felt this was a happy medium.
All right, so let me ask you the moneymaker question. Did you consider fewer units?
I'll defer to the planner.
That's really a question that is coming at us right, you know, in my face, and so I don't have an answer for you, and I'm not prepared to talk about
Is something
this.
that, who would I present that question
Well,
to?
it would obviously be the principles of the client, and the architect certainly isn't the person to make that decision. I hear
But no,
what you're
but
saying.
stop for a second, because I think this is very much in line.
I thought
To
this
the-
was public design.
Excuse me, sir. I think it's very much in line, because we're talking about context, we're talking about design issues. Scale is a major concern in my mind with respect to the scaling and the massing of this structure. And it's, to me, some of the trouble we're having with this thing could be accomplished with a much smaller project.
I could address that. We could, I understand your point, and we could maintain the 40 unit count and the 6 affordable unit count and made more smaller buildings. That would have been, you know, as your characterization, more in line with what else is in town. And we just felt that when we were going through various plans, we just felt that that was more detrimental than doing 2 separate buildings. We didn't think 1 building was the right approach. We didn't think 4 buildings was the right approach. But if we did 4 buildings, you would have been looking at, you know, a different rendering here. But we didn't feel that was the right approach. And the planner will expound on it.
Okay. Rich Bernal? Yes. Okay. You need to be sworn in, please. Your name and
Yes,
address.
State your full name for the record, please. And
Not
if-
working.
Yes, it's
Sounds like
working.
it's working. And if you were not sworn in last time,
Okay.
we'll have to swear you in.
Okay, my name is Zahir Jan,
State it and spell the last name.
Daheer, as the first name,
Okay.
last name Jan.
Yeah, I don't recall that you testified last time.
Fair enough.
You swear that any testimony you'll give will be the truth, the whole
I
truth,
so
and nothing
swear.
but the truth? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I have missed my previous meetings. I have just, obviously, we are
Did
into
we get an
deep.
address?
We need an address as well.
Okay, 1306 Timberbrook Drive, Bedminster.
Thank you.
I start again.
Hmm?
I missed
Please.
previous meetings,
Mhm.
and obviously, we are into detailed design.
Mhm.
My question is, and I would request if this work has been done, has the developers done an environmental impact study?
That would-
issue was addressed. We actually dealt with it through the engineer. I would defer to Mr. Ferrero on that.
And let me detail what I need to see if it has been done. Drinking water supply, impact on the drinking water supply, sewage disposal, garbage collection, our traffic, and effect on the neighbors who live around this development.
These, okay.
If this has been done, I would
Well,
pick
the
up.
engineer is going to come back and he will do stormwater management. He had some other issues that needed to be addressed. The traffic has not happened yet. This questioning right now is for the architect only. So
Oh, I
if you have
see.
any questions for the architect, that's what we need
Okay.
right now.
So this will be done and I can come and
Yes.
get that?
We'll have other experts that will be testifying, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You have a question for him, for this architect?
You have
No?
any
No, I have
architectural
no,
questions?
I'm sorry,
Any-
no, I have no question for the architect. It looks
Okay.
very beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the audience?
Make a note of that.
I believe you were sworn in, Mr. Haggerty?
Yes, Brian Haggerty, Fairview Drive, I'm still under oath.
Yes.
Good evening and thank you for coming. Regarding if anything else had been considered, I guess you're going to leave this for the planner, the page 234 of the Bedminster Master Plan specifically addresses this lot for
You know,
target.
you're asking planning questions of the
Okay.
architect, of
Okay.
an architect.
Okay.
So if we
So I
can
just
defer
want to, I
to...
want to really be sure, even to the point of the page from the, was not part of your design brief during the architecture? It's not? Oh, you don't want to answer? It was not in your design brief? Okay. I'll have to plan on that if you put it in your design brief. Do you know anything about Council on Affordable Housing and the Bedminster recent agreement in 2018? You testified to that? Because you
Is he
testified,
asking me?
That would also be the planner, is that
well,
correct?
he testified as the 15% inclusion.
No, he did not, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Spanish.
I misunderstood. Sorry.
He testified that there are 6 affordable units in the project that's being proposed.
Did you make the determination to include 6? I think the answer was it's from the state ruling.
Yes.
Thank you. You mentioned going before the Historic Preservation Commission. Do you know when that was?
Approximately 2 months ago.
And was it before or after July 16, 2019?
It was June 20, 2013.
13?
I'm sorry, 2019.
June, okay.
Wrong year.
And I pose this a legal question for council, whether the Historic Preservation Commission presentation was before the date of the notice to the adjoiners is within the realm of how these things go.
I can only tell you we were told that we had to go to the Historic Preservation Commission before we could be deemed complete for notice purposes.
Okay. So this may be our problem as a township or as a state with the laws. Okay. You mentioned the steep slope. The Bedminster ordinance defines steep slope as 15%. Is that a fair topic then for the civil engineer? And I don't think we should really use the term steep slope since it is an engineering term. It hasn't been established as steep.
That's fine.
So everything about steep slope was anecdotal and not factual tested. You mentioned you've worked on projects with Elite before, you've worked on many projects. Have you worked on a project with Elite that was not an apartment complex?
I think so, yes.
Many of them, or most of them?
No,
apartment
mostly apartment complexes.
Thank you. And previous questions related to Maplewood and a project in Maplewood, I believe has 2 projects in Maplewood, if I'm not mistaken.
There's one cluster of 3 buildings, and there's another project, a standalone project.
And
Could
standalone
be-
would be the Springfield Avenue, 1700 Springfield Avenue.
Correct.
Are you aware whether or not that was an area in need of renewal?
I don't recall the details.
Thanks. And the other cluster was 92 Burnett Avenue?
Correct.
How many units are in 92 Burnett Avenue, if you know approximately?
150 maybe,
150.
roughly,
Thank you.
in 3 buildings.
150 in 3 buildings, 50 apartments to the...
No, I believe it was like 60, and roughly 30, somewhere in there.
Okay. So roughly 30 apartments is a building we've done before for the... in-
Oh, yes, yes.
And then there's 2 Mountain Boulevard, which is actually the address of record for the applicant. How many apartments are in 210 Mountain Boulevard? How many buildings?
There are 2 buildings. One building is a commercial building, and the other building is a 2-family home.
So a commercial building and 2-family home. If I'm going to not ask you, but I'm going to let Mr. Lair know that when the planner comes up, you can describe how a 2-family and a commercial building, which apparently would meet the zoning in this zone, would not have been considered if they were and were rejected, but I'm deferring that from the architect, of course. Did you have anything to do with the project on Birch Run Drive in Piscataway? Is that in the lead property?
No, I was not part of that project.
Thank you.
Sure.
And coming up, they don't exist yet, Berkeley Crossing, is that on your design boards, or is that not your project?
No, that's a project that I'm working with the lead on.
And how many units, how many buildings would that be?
I'm not sure what this
Yeah,
name is.
Mr. Hagy, where we're going on this?
We've heard testimony so far that the site has difficult challenges, but a decision was made, and apparently the design brief or group decision was these two buildings with 40 apartments, 4,000 square feet of retail, and give take 40 parking
Right,
spaces.
so what's your question?
Was that right? He gave direct testimony that he's worked with Elite before, and then he gave opinions about working with Elite.
Right,
I'm
what's-
trying to get to what does that mean? We can't ask
What
about
are
planning
you
questions.
referring to Berkeley Heights, how does that relate to Bedminster, this Bedminster project?
That's what I'm asking, because there's a 45-unit building going into Berkeley Heights.
Each case stands on its own merits.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the point.
It isn't a
where you're going.
45-unit building, first of all.
Okay, then I'm
That's not
mistaken.
correct.
I'm trying to understand the process from the architect's point of view of why these buildings of this mass and bulk, with this coverage, in this location, came up as the right thing to do, from the architect's point of view.
The planning testimony, and I'm not going to allow Mr.
Okay.
Rocco to answer that.
Very good. Thank you. So back to the architectural, strictly the architectural. In response to questions from board members, there was a discussion that the western end of each building, if I'm right from my brief look at the plans, the western end of each building, what's called the first floor, is European numbering, ground first, second. The first floor hits grade at the western end, roughly, a little bit above grade floor. Is that correct?
Number one, it's not European.
Okay.
The ground, what we're calling the ground floor, meets the definition of a basement per the building code.
It does. Now, I can ask you about the building code because you're an architect, you're an expert in the building code. Okay. And when you say the building code, you're talking about the NJUCC, not the zoning. So we can talk with the planner about zoning.
Correct.
Okay. So you're going by the building code that takes the grade around the entire building and has the 6 foot to the first floor criteria? Is that?
It's a more complicated, defined criteria than how you just summarized it.
I'm having trouble
A little
hearing you.
louder.
It's a much more involved criteria than the way he just described it.
Okay, and I'm at this point a little confused. I wasn't prepared for the architect tonight. The single point reference of 13 feet of the first floor above grade, making the actual grade floor actually a story above grade, the 13 feet single point, is that from the Bedminster ordinances or is that from the NJUCC?
First of all, it's not 13 feet, it's 12 feet. It's from the NJUCC, and if you want me to bore the board with the definition of a basement versus the definition of a first floor or a story versus a non-story, if you want me to bore them with all those details, I can go through, I could spend 20 minutes and explain to you what a story is, what a basement is, what a first floor is. We're in front of the planning board. I'm not sure that I should...
I'll do the professional courtesy that I get to Mr. Jaworski, and I'll put it in a letter, and I'm sure it'll get delivered to you. Take it up next time you're on the stand. Thank you. The amenities and the recreation, is that something you will address, or would that be the civil engineer, or would that be the applicant?
The outdoor recreation space would be addressed by the civil engineer.
In the allocation of apartment sizes and types, I believe you said that was basically driven by the regulations, and so I'm going to assume you don't have any testimony on demographic of families and individuals and so forth. That would not be within your testimony.
We'll have to separate the market rate decision-making process of the apartment spread, meaning 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, et cetera, versus the affordable housing apartment spread. There are 2 different criteria. One is dictated by the state, if I'm not correct, and the other one is dictated by the preference of the developer.
What is the height at the front of the building from the Lamington Road to the, I'll just go over and point in both directions, so you see to this line?
To the eve line, from which point?
From Lamington Road. If I'm driving by and I look up at the building, or walking on the sidewalk and look up at the building, how high is the eve line above me?
It's the east building you're asking the question about?
Actually each, because it should be similar, right? Because the road slopes up, and the testimony was that the buildings are sited to follow the contour.
Well, the west building is definitely higher off of Lamington Road than the east building, but they generally follow the contours. But the height would be, I don't have that exact number, but it would probably be, or that eve would probably be around 45 feet, maybe 42 feet, in that range. But it varies every step you take.
We'll see. And you testified earlier that the height to the eve line or to the ridge line is lower from the back because of the grading and the parking.
Actually, I didn't testify to that, but that's correct, though.
I thought you gave an explanation about the vagaries of the Bedminster zoning and going around. If we consider the back, then it would be...
Well, I never mentioned anything about the eve. I always spoke about the
I stand
ridge.
corrected. You said the grade would be higher in the back, and therefore the height of the building would be less.
Right.
And you talked about a flat roof, which I assume the eve line would just about set where the height is of the flat roof plus a parapet. But you don't want to do a flat roof.
We don't want to do a flat roof, and the eve of a pitched roof wouldn't necessarily be the top of the parapet of a flat roof. There's probably a 3-4 foot difference or so.
Thank you. I'm going to move one of your plans, if I may.
Sure.
Yes, there is.
Thank you for putting in the nicest one up front.
You put the renderings into evidence, or they're part of the package. I see the rendering on the left is in front of you right now.
A3 for the record.
A3 for the record.
A3 is on PB 100.
Thank you.
A2, whatever that one is, A4,
A4 is the one to the
is not in the submitted package.
Did you show either of these renderings to the Historic Preservation Commission?
Yes.
Were these renderings reviewed by the civil, I'm sorry, I said either. Did you show both?
I believe we did. All right. Yes.
Did the civil engineer review these renderings with you before you presented them?
Not with me, no.
Okay. So if I were to ask you that when I look at that rendering, I don't see the 4 foot, 5 foot, whatever, 4 foot, 6 foot retaining wall structure between the buildings where I'd expect to see it from the site plan, that's, we'll defer to the
If
civil
I'm not
engineer.
mistaken, the retaining wall is behind the parking lot. We have it right here. And I see a car, and I see
Are the
a tree.
retaining walls shown on A3 and A4, and if they aren't, would they be visible on A3 or A4 if
I
you
think
tried
he's
to show them?
confusing these retaining walls.
No, I'm asking about those retaining walls. The other retaining wall on the front and on the road are shown. They're very clearly shown.
So this pair of retaining walls is 4 and 6 foot retaining
Yes.
wall.
Obviously, the 3-foot retaining wall in front shows
That is
there.
behind this building, and we did not, it wouldn't show up. It's behind the car, we didn't.
And you're showing a car and trees in that location, and in fact, that location, if I'm discerning correctly from the site plan, that would be the location of the wall. So I don't understand how I see a car which is on grade and a tree which extends above grade without seeing the wall.
You are absolutely correct. We could, that wall, those pair of walls would be visible from that view, and they could be seen from that view. You're correct.
And the slope on the grading plan appears to my eye to be much steeper than the slope depicted there. So do you think that is a significant issue? Do you think I'm
Depicted
mistaken?
where?
I'm sorry? In that same location between the buildings, above the stone retaining walls, the grading plan shows what actually probably is a steep slope, greater than 15% by the township definitions.
This is a architectural rendering that shows the appearance of the building from the street. It is not a technical drawing. The civil drawings depict contour, steep slope, retaining walls. These renderings are used to give a general impression of what the building would look like from the street.
So the rendering is to give a general impression of the building from the street. From what vantage point is A4? As the street here.
Vantage point, it's taken from across the street.
At about
I'm not
25 feet
sure
in the air.
what you mean by vantage point. So if I go to the, here. So A4 is standing about here across Lamington Road and taking a view this way. And A2 is standing about here and looking this way where you only see a portion of,
A3, you mean?
I'm sorry, A3.
And are those perspectives from grade, or are they from basically bird's eye view?
This perspective is probably about roughly 50, I'm just guessing, I would have to go into our computer software to figure out exactly where we took the vantage point from, but it's probably 15 feet off the street, whereas this one, it's further back, but I believe it's a lower perspective. It's probably maybe 6 feet off the street.
Thank you. Are you planning to go back to the Historic Preservation Commission?
We have been requested to come back to deal with some of the design elements once the project is approved.
So you appeared, but do you have a determination?
They did not issue a final determination, a certificate of appropriateness yet. They said in their correspondence that they wanted to finalize the materials and before they issued a certificate of appropriateness.
Was the bulk of the building specifically considered at that presentation?
Both buildings were shown exactly the way they are.
Was the bulk of the building in terms of dimensions expressly considered at that discussion?
I don't know what you mean, but they were both presented as they were shown.
Does that say it's 205 feet wide?
Well,
or
let me-
shows a
let me
picture?
get to-
It's a legitimate architectural question.
The floor plans with dimensions on them, as they were presented to this board, were also presented to the architectural board.
And was your sign, your proposed signage considered that at that presentation?
It was in the rendering. I don't believe we presented a technical drawing of the sign with specific height, but it was in the rendering.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we should take a break. Can we have a 5-minute break before we go on? I'd like to, yes, I think we all, okay, 5 minutes, please. Just like to remind you, we won't have any new testimony after 10 o'clock, so we'll try to keep going as much as we can. Okay, next, we'll have your name and address, please.
Did you testify last time? Just state your name for the record, please, and your address.
Sure. Andrew Isaacs, 15 Steeplechase Court, Bedminster.
And you're still under oath.
Thank you. Andrew Isaacs. You're welcome. Do you have any financial interest in the development?
I
Have to
object
answer
to the
that.
question. First of all, that's just a completely inappropriate question to ask at a planning board.
Why? That all has to do with scale here.
We presented a disclosure statement when we presented our application. It identified the principles of the applicant.
No.
To ask the architect that question is just inappropriate.
Why is that inappropriate? Why?
Because it is. Legally, it's inappropriate. We provided a disclosure statement
In the disclosure
identifying...
statement, does he have the financial interest in it?
He does not,
Thank you. That's fine.
but it's
That's the
inappropriate.
part.
It's an inappropriate question.
You don't have to be so...
No, it's an
You don't have to
inappropriate
be like
question
that.
to ask an architect
It don't
during
have to
the...
be like that. There's no need for that. No need to be confrontational.
Sir, I've heard you
I have a
ask
question
questions.
about that. So what?
I've
That's
heard-
why you whispered
I've
to him the
heard-
same thing?
I've heard the way that you've questioned, and so please don't tell me how I can respond.
Okay.
Let's
Okay,
calm
all
down.
right, let's move on, please.
move on.
Do you have a question for the architect,
Yes, you
please?
mentioned earlier that this plan was the solution. Remember that testimony a few minutes ago?
I don't remember using the word solution,
You
but,
did.
okay.
You did.
Oh,
You did. So
okay.
my question back to you is, what was the problem you were given to solve that this was the solution for?
Well, I wasn't given any particular problem. The team was given a problem, and we worked on the project as a team.
So, and what was the ask then? This is that you came up and you started saying this was the solution. This is the best solution. So what was the ask? What was the problem that you were solving for, that this was the best solution?
The problem, the question was the 40 units, some retail, parking addressing the residential units, parking addressing the retail. There was some concern about the, early on, that I was given instructions to deal with the placing of the buildings to enhance the central district of the town. And I'm sure there were more issues than that, but those were the principal ones.
Thank you. So, as to what I hear is the direction to you was 40 units, retail, parking and so forth, correct? That's what I just heard you say.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I said more than that. Go ahead.
Thank you. Were you also asked to come up with a architectural design that would meet the current code of that property?
I don't know what you mean by the current code of the property.
Zoning of that lot. This is, you're asking for variances here. Were you asked, so you just testified that you were asked about how can I create a piece of, a architectural design with those 40 units and the retail and parking and so forth. My question to you is, were you also asked the same for an architectural design that would not require any of the variances?
No, I was not asked to come up with a totally as-of-right solution.
Thank you. In this drawing here that you testified that you presented to the historical commission, right? In this drawing here, exhibit A4, can you tell me how high the top of the roof is approximately?
That elevation is 224 feet 9 inches.
224,
Well, the elevation is 224 feet 9 inches.
and can you tell me approximately, what I see in this picture here is these trees look to be, sorry, that these trees look to be almost double the height of this building. Is that correct? Would you say that's approximate on this illustration?
Yes.
Okay. And in this illustration here, this looks like pretty heavy, dense trees. So how high would these trees need to be about double the size of this roof?
Well, the elevation at the top of the hill is 216. So when you put trees on top of that hill, that
So these
rendering is probably pretty accurate.
So if this building is 200 and something and the trees are 200 and something,
Well, I'm giving you elevations off of
Sure.
sea level datum. So the building from average grade is 43 feet. Are you asking me if the tree line is
how
proportionate
tall
to
are
the?
these trees?
Those trees some of those trees would be at the top of the hill, which is elevation 216. Trees can be 40, 50, I didn't measure the trees.
So
They could be
and
30
for a
feet,
tree
they
to
could be
become
60
40,
feet.
50, 60 feet,
They could be 80 feet.
80 feet.
Yeah,
How old? That's got to be a pretty old tree.
Right, we
Right.
didn't survey the height of the trees.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, and these trees on the illustration, they look to be all about the same. You know, the trees are pretty short, right and high.
In
that
terms of
Similar,
species,
similar height and fullness, right?
well, I see one tree that's a little bit above the roof, and then I see other trees that are higher.
Right, so these trees that are a little bit above the roof line might be on the same grade. And so my question is,
Yeah.
does this represent the plan? Because how many of these up to 80-foot trees, as you just said, are going to be planted back in the development?
So this rendering, as I stated, the last gentleman asked me a question, the intent of the rendering is to show the architectural features and massing of the building in relationship to the street. We were not accurate. We did not survey the trees in the back. We did not look at the heights of the trees. We did not look at pinpoint the locations. That is just a general washing of trees behind the buildings. The questions you're asking me would require a much more sophisticated level of rendering that would focus on existing tree conditions that we did not focus on here. We didn't feel it was appropriate, not appropriate, we didn't feel it was necessary considering what we felt was the intention of the renderings, which was to present the architectural features of the building in relationship to the street.
Okay, thank you. What I also don't see on here are any of the houses or homes that are on the adjacent street behind.
Trail.
Right? So when you brought this to the historical commission, you mentioned before, you said you mentioned that they did not have many objections. And so my question is that this could be, you just testified that this was really about the architect, right? And that you did not do any study about back here, because it's my understanding that the plan is to just put back in 250 trees that are maybe 1 to 3 inches in diameter, and this does not reflect that. So the point being is that this could be very misleading. Because this could be anywhere out in upstate New York, which does not reflect what you have down here and what's not actually on that street. You see homes, you see everything, and these are, as you mentioned, up to 80-foot trees.
Do you have a question,
Yeah,
sir?
Mr. Eisenstein, do you have a question, or you're making a statement?
The question is, that, let me just rephrase my comment, okay? You just testified that this was really for representation of the architect and not the trees, right? Correct.
That would,
What's your question, Mr.
I
Isaac?
just asked him.
No, you said I have a
I
comment.
said correct, and he just said yes.
No, you said I have a comment. What's your
I
question?
said yes. Is this an
I assume your question, maybe we can save some time here,
It was asked.
is whether the rendering, the exhibits accurately depict what the tree growth would be after the buildings are constructed. Is that your
Thank you.
ultimate question?
Yes.
so the question is, how long after the building is built?
No.
Is it the moment at C of O when the trees are 3 and 4 inches diameter, the caliber, or is it 20 years after when the trees are fully mature trees? And you didn't ask me that question.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we got the clarification. Regarding the, I think, did you mention that the total square footage is around 29,000 feet?
I didn't say that.
I think that was part of the conversation. So what is the total square footage?
Square footage of what?
Of both buildings?
Of both buildings combined, including the garages and all the floors up above, is 84,221 square feet.
And the current property is approved for how many square feet?
I don't,
You don't,
I was confused over that conversation.
but you don't know the answer.
No, I don't, I didn't even understand the question.
You don't
There's no FAR associated with the zoning, so the question seemed odd to me.
You mentioned in your testimony that this is quote-unquote good build quality. How do you determine that? Is that about the price per square foot? How do you define good build quality?
Well, I think I was referring to other projects that Elite, well, I think I was putting it in the context of the quality that Elite builds their buildings that I've worked on. And that is a question of, that's referring to trim details, solid quality of the doors, quality of the hardware, kitchen counters, et cetera, et cetera.
And when you do your design, do you take into cost per square foot?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Okay. And did you do that for this project?
No, I was following, well, in a certain respect, I was following similar building methods that they used on other projects and applied it to
Like
this
in
project.
Maplewood, like you mentioned before?
To a certain extent, yeah.
And what was
There
the
are other,
cost?
there are elements here that will make this building more expensive. Maplewood is not a good, for some reason, everybody here keeps referring to Maplewood. Maplewood projects are not a good comparable to this project. This will be a more expensive project to build.
And what is the price per square foot of that?
I prefer not to answer
Not
that.
sure what the relevance of the
appropriate.
question
And it's
is.
proprietary
Well, because
information.
the quote-unquote, the relative good quality, how do we know that this is a good quality compared to something else? That's the relevance, right? When you go to look at a home in, one of the ways you determine the quality of it is the price.
He already
per square
tried to answer the question, and what the square footage cost in Maplewood is just isn't relevant.
Well, it's not the Maplewood here. The question has to do with, how do you know, how do you validate when someone says this is going to be a good quality? That's ambiguous, right? The way you determine quality is typically about the price per square foot. I just answered the question if they could share that so we can have an understanding of quote-unquote the quality. Quality is ambiguous.
Is it a question or a statement?
That's the question. So
What's the question?
Can you define quality by price per square foot? Otherwise, how do you-
Not
how do you-
necessarily.
how do you
I
define
can
it?
have a very expensive superstructure to get the building built because of grading of the site or because of this, or it could be, there could be piles on the job and there could be very low level finishes. But in the end, that might be a more expensive building that has conventional footings and has marble all over the place on the finishes. So your question is flawed in the sense that there's not a direct correlation between price per square foot and the quality of the finishes in any particular building.
Mr. Rocco, you testified that you use high-grade trim, you use granite tops, you use wood floors. You testified to those things, did you not?
Yes.
And that makes this unique, this building, correct?
It establishes a quality of the building that allows Elite to generate certain rents and allow for a quality tenant to come into the building.
Including the balconies, that is another design element that is unique, correct?
Yes.
But you also just testified that those things don't necessarily mean quality, right? You said you could have this.
No, what I said was, no, that's not what I said. What I said was a price per square foot doesn't always translate into, doesn't necessarily equate with the quality of the finishes in a particular building.
Did marble increase the price?
What's the point of
Yeah,
this?
I know, he's.
With all due respect, what's the, we could stay here all night debating what quality means, and there's no
But there-
definitive
so
answer.
I think the disconnect is that there are more things that go into a price per square foot calculation than the finish than the finishes.
Yeah,
in a
I'm not talking
unit.
about finishes. That is
But are-
not just the finishes.
But there are things that are structural that don't have any bearing, and so it's not really a metric in a total price per square foot.
I would disagree with it, but I'm done.
You sworn last time or no?
Last meeting a couple months
Yeah.
ago, yes.
All right, could you just state your full name and address for the record, please?
Jesse Ruzicka, Ruzicka, 446 Main Street, Bedminster.
You're still under oath.
Okay. Several times this evening, you referenced the character of Bedminster. Really, you said the character of the town. How would you describe the character of Bedminster?
I see, just visually looking at the town and driving around, I see very casual residential type feel buildings with porches, pitched roofs, and it's a very, very casual feel to it.
So if I describe Bedminster character as one with significant historical relevance in the Revolutionary War, one as having some of the best scenic roads in New Jersey, one as a small town with considerable preserved open space and lots of horse farms, how does this project reflect those characteristics?
That's what you see in the town.
I'm a resident of this town.
Right, no, I'm not disagreeing with you, that's what you see. When I drive down 202, in this area, Lamington Road, I'm telling you what I said.
All right, so is there anything unique about this project when someone looks at it, they say, wow, that's Bedminster?
We feel, we've always, everybody that this project's presented to, whether it was formally or informally or by passing, everybody is very pleased with the aesthetic of the building. There are elements that fit into the town of Bedminster, but no one, or formally or informally, has said that this is a particularly Bedminster town building, and I'm not sure that that could be defined anyway.
Okay, is it reasonable to think that this complex looks like most other condos or townhouses, and frankly could be put in any town, New Jersey?
No.
So what's different about this one than a D.R. Horton or a Toll Brothers or any other townhouse or condo complex in New Jersey?
Well, one of the things, number one, we didn't do 3-4 stories, which we've done in Maplewood. That's why I feel we kept it at 2 residential floors. We've put these long common porches in the front of the building that we never do on any other more generic type apartment building. So there are definitely elements here that you wouldn't see on a more generic apartment building.
Have you ever designed buildings similar to this one in other projects?
Every building that I do has some uniqueness about it.
Okay. What type of retail do you expect in the 4,000 square feet?
We already testified that we don't know yet. We don't
Okay.
have any.
So on the renditions, I see a restaurant, I see a coffee shop, and a bookstore. Is it reasonable to think that you'll have those three types of businesses.
Well, from an
Yeah.
that's not an architectural question, it's a marketing question,
Okay.
and...
They don't know.
All right, okay, so who drew the picture?
He did.
Okay, so what made you decide to put a coffee shop and a restaurant on the picture?
Staff drew the picture, drew the rendering, and we typically put names like that. They don't carry any particular, of all the boards I've been into, no one has questioned the names on the signs.
Okay, so last time we were here, we talked a lot about parking.
Yes.
And the parking has been planned for the least amount of spaces needed for a common retailer, yet you're representing the most spaces needed for a retailer in a restaurant. Is there a reason that's been done?
I object because it meets the retail parking requirements of the VM zone, so...
I think it was explained at the hearing last time by Mr. Ferraro that in the event this project gets approved and a retail applicant comes to the town for a permit, the retail operation will be looked at in the context of what parking is required, and if there is insufficient parking under the ordinance standards, then they're going to have to come to this board.
I was there and I heard all of that, and so either there's a variance allowed for additional parking, or the space stays vacant. Wouldn't it be wiser to plan for the type of retailers that may actually be in the shop?
Well, there's a third option, which is that they find someone else to occupy the space.
Okay. Would it surprise you if I told you that there's over 300,000 square feet of vacant retail and commercial space in Bedminster currently?
I'm not
If
sure
you're
what has
asking an
to...
architectural question.
With all due respect, I'm not sure what that has to do with the architect's testimony.
Okay. Would it surprise you that if I told you there are currently greater than 40 rentals in Bedminster?
It's not an architectural question. What's your question to the architect about?
I'm asking if it surprises him.
It's not a question to the architect.
Does Bedminster need additional affordable housing to conform with state regulations?
That's not
That's for the
question
planner,
the architect.
for the planner.
When can we expect to see the planner? Because this is the second meeting and clearly most of the questions...
Well, we've only
Usually the
gotten through
planner
two
comes
witnesses.
last.
So we've only gotten through two witnesses.
What? Okay.
So
All right,
we'll
fair enough.
continue.
What is the height of the parking garage where the cars park? What's the maximum height of a vehicle?
What is the height of a vehicle?
Yeah.
The building code requires a parking garage to be at least 7 feet.
Okay,
Clear
so
height.
7 feet of parking and
that's-
then 2 floors of residential.
But that's not, you're asking me what's required, and it's not a zoning issue, it's a building code, but that's a generic building code answer.
Okay, so one of the things you said just moments ago was you designed this with 2 stories of residential, yet you have a full story of parking, you have 2 stories of residential, and then you do have a pitched roof that really reflects another story, be it livable or not. It adds nearly 4 stories of height. If I'm standing on the road, it appears to be a 4-story structure. Would you agree, based on how it's drawn?
I would say that on one side of the building, it reads as a 2-story building with a pitched roof on top, and on the east side of the buildings, it reads as a 3-story building with a pitched roof on top.
So knowing that the town requires a certain height restriction, why wasn't it drawn to conform from the start?
We felt that there were benefits to having the pitched roof on the building, as explained.
And if the land use board doesn't approve the variance for the height, would we expect that you would not resubmit new plans that conform?
That's not a question that this architect can answer.
Okay. No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to, please?
Hi, George Waters, I asked a question last time, just one last time.
State your address, please.
196 Somerville Road.
You're still under...
You bet, thanks.
I didn't catch your name.
George Waters, 196 Somerville. Your firm prepared the renderings,
Yes.
and you spoke about sort of the mass of the buildings in the context of the town.
Mhm.
do you think it would have been, do you think it would be worth it for the viewer to see the adjacent buildings and an accurate representation of the horizon and the tree line in order to assess what the context, how those buildings fit into the context? I guess what I'm getting at is that if I'm not saying that it is, but if the tree line were of an exaggerated height, and if the background were of an exaggerated density and greenery, it could appear that the buildings were less massive in the rendering than they would appear in real life.
I think there's the addition of the civil and landscaping plans, and the tree, evidently there's a revised tree plan that's coming out, that those have to be referred to get a better understanding of the tree plantings on the site. And if asked to have our renderings reflect more accurately what that final tree planting is, how it's presented, where we can always do that.
Yeah, I think it would help the townspeople and the board to have a better understanding, as opposed to sort of I don't want to say fictionalized, an artist's representation of what it could look like.
Anyone else?
Can I interject a question?
Certainly.
So, in each case, the rendering is from a position 15 to 20 feet above the ground.
No,
Off
the one
off
on
street
the
level.
one on the left side is about 15, 20 feet above the street, and the one on the right side is probably maybe 6 to 10 feet. It's a lower perspective. But I could.
So
but-
to hit to the last questioner's point, might it be a good idea to see what the building would look like with the man in the street?
Yes, we could, our rendering software allows us to do
Computer-generated type
that.
of-
Yeah, and, you know, we could put these renderings in a photograph, in an actual
So, if I'm
photograph.
a 5'9"
Yeah, we
guy or
could just
gal
pick any spot.
standing on the sidewalk or across the street on the sidewalk, give us a better sense
Yes.
of the scale of this building.
Yes, that can happen.
Yeah.
And going back a couple of questioners before, I'm not sure that I've seen in the package, but is there like section through the site from the curb to, say, Steeplechase Court up and beyond about where you stop disturbing trees, where you start disturbing trees, what the relative profile is? Is there a plan? Is there a section like that through the property?
I didn't prepare one, no.
Would that be something you would do, or is that something the engineer would do?
That's, if,
It's not something that the architect.
I didn't think so.
Limited disturbances present marked on that plan. So where trees are going to be removed, where they're not.
Right, I think the question is not so much about where trees are removed, but a cross-section of the elevations, because there's a lot of slope on that property, as we've all talked about. And so the non-disturbed old-growth trees in the back of the property are considerably higher than the street. And so seeing a side slice through the property might be...
From, Ms. Patras, from what point? From Lamington Road?
Say middle, yeah, say perpendicular to the street.
Cross-section, site section, something the engineer would do from the whole
Yeah.
site.
If I can interject, I mean, my clients live on Steeplechase Court,
Yes.
so we'd like to see something from Steeplechase Court.
Okay, well, maybe the engineer could prepare something. He hadn't come back yet, and so hopefully he will come back, and we can look at that.
So
right up-
what is actually out there will give you a better perspective.
Okay,
on what's
that would be fine. Okay, I think we're done with this witness, Jeff, and, yes, Mr. Haggerty?
Um,
I'll attempt to be brief.
Please,
I'll intend to be brief.
please, we'd like to get other witness
I'll
on.
intend to be brief.
State your name again for the record, please.
Brian Haggerty, I'm still under oath. As I look at my screen clip of the county tax map, not only is this above the ground, I believe this perspective, if this is a 204-foot building, may be taken from the property across the street. And I'm wondering, once you get all these lined up, and I think a section, as the board member said, would be helpful, I wonder if even from across the street, you'll even see the trees over the roof, and that would be a very important thing to bring back to us. Would you
Well, the
say?
buildings are,
Would you say it would be important to have a section and a perspective to see whether the trees even show above the roof?
well, I'm just commenting on your comment, that the buildings are accurately lined up in relationship to the street, and they're accurately lined up to each other. So when you said they're not accurately lined up, I'm not sure what you meant by that. What isn't accurate is the massing of the trees in the back. And if I discuss with the lead, I would be willing to superimpose these 3D renderings of the buildings in a photograph taken from a street view, which I think would resolve a lot of the questions this past hour.
My question is, would the perspective be from approximately 5 feet average eye level from the sidewalk across Lamington Road, or would the perspective be what appears to me, and you can disagree, onto the Gus property? Well, we'll see. My question to you is it possible that the point of view causes some distortion in the appearance, because we may actually be on the porch of the house across the street?
Right. I think it would be, I have to discuss with the lead, but I think it would be very useful if we, as I said, superimpose these renderings in a photograph. They would be taken, the photo would be taken at eye level. We're not going to, at street view, or possibly, if we're permitted, take the photograph a little bit into the property across the street.
Or right on the public sidewalk.
Or right on the public sidewalk.
Is the board requesting that the architect prepare, in effect, a supplemental exhibit to
Either the architect or the engineer, whoever's more appropriate.
Well, that's the second part of
Yeah.
this. From across the street on Lamington Road, but roughly at eye level, for lack of a better term, from somebody who might be standing on the street. And part two is the board requesting that the engineer provide a cross-section showing the extent of tree removal and such, more from the perspective of steeplechase court.
And grading.
And grading.
Grading, I think, is the important thing.
Right.
You willing to do that, Mr. Rivera?
Mr. Lewis,
He's-
conferencing.
He's working.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, okay, good.
For clarification purposes, there's a sidewalk across the street, so we're going to be talking about the view from someone standing on the sidewalk on the opposite side of Lamington Road.
Yes, I think that would be the most...
A fair representation.
Fair representation.
And I think we heard a request for what things might look like from steeplechase. which-
Well, from Steeplechase or from Lamington looking at Steeplechase?
I'm not sure.
My clients are on Steeplechase.
You're both.
Yes, I know. I know they are.
If you can, we'd like it. If not, then we'll try to make our
You would
case.
like what? I'm not quite,
We'd like to see a perspective from
But I think
from
Mr.
Lamington or
Galvin,
from Steeplechase?
the issue,
Steeplechase. I
From
said my clients are
Steeplechase down.
From Steeplechase down, yes.
right.
Okay.
I think the issue that we're grappling with here is that we're talking about the view from a public way. So if you're saying at the cul-de-sac at Steeplechase, when you come all the way to the end of the cul-de-sac and look between the houses, I mean, is that the kind of,
I guess. I
I'm trying to think how it would be a meaningful representation
I mean,
that,
we could,
Yeah, that
I
would
could get my client's permission, let them come on my client's lawn, but I think we're talking about the street.
I suspect that's what we should be talking about.
Yeah. I'm not trying to,
I didn't think so.
you know, I'll
Okay.
provide my own pictures from our location.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Lear, you're okay with that?
With an accurate representation of the horizon lines and tree lines as they exist in real life would be the most important.
Do you have any more questions, Mr. Haggerty?
Very, very quickly, too. I believe you pointed to this end of the rendering when you talked about the 216-foot elevation of the high point of the site. Just for clarity, I believe it's at the northwestern corner, as I discern from the grades and as I see from the grading plan, the northwestern corner. This may be lower. Can you check into that when you're doing the rendering, the civil engineer?
Yeah, but I think we agreed we're going to take the photo.
Okay.
from the cul-de-sac, from the public cul-de-sac.
I'm actually talking, excuse me, for the Lamington picture, if you have a photograph, you can adjust that.
Chairman, I don't think he should be telling us what to do.
Okay.
We know what we want to do, we will do it.
The
He
request
seems to be like directing how this should be done. That's really our responsibility.
I think you're right. I think we leave it up to the architect and the engineer to come up with the objective.
The request for clarification is that you indicated that the northeast corner of the site is at 216 feet. I believe if you coordinate with the civil engineer, you'll find that it's at 216 feet is on the northwest corner. So when you do the rendering, if you can coordinate within your team, it would be appreciated. Can you?
Thank you, sir.
Well, that's not, I just have to correct them, that's not what I said. I said the driveway of the house at the end is at
I
216
understand.
feet.
Thank you.
Based on a spot elevation on the civil engineer's drawings.
I request a clarification. I accept your clarification. You mentioned materials. You were mentioning finished materials. What will be the structural elements of the buildings?
The ground floor will be, or basement, when we go to the building department, be called a basement, will be a combination of concrete and steel frame, and the two residential floors will be wood frame.
Essentially a concrete cap slab between the parking spaces and the residential, and then wood frame above.
No, between the residential and the retail and parking will be a steel frame with wood truss infill.
Thank you.
Question, the building is 100% sprinkled? The park-
It's going to meet the residential sprinkler code, the NFPA 13R. The two residential.
What does that mean to me?
Okay, I don't know what, I'm sorry. Okay, what it means is there are different sprinkler standards. The residential portion of the building, meaning the two residential floors, will meet the residential sprinkler code, which means.
A wet system.
What? Yeah, it's a wet system, but it's a different criteria, spacing of sprinkler, a million things. And the retail and the parking garage will meet a different standards. And all of this will be presented to the building department and the fire inspector and the fire subcode official, and we'll meet all, whatever.
But there's sprinklers throughout.
But it's a sprinkled building, to answer your question, yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Do I see another hand? Yes? Come on, please.
Bonnie Bishop, you asked a question last time, too. 17 Steeple Chase Court. Thank you. So, I have a question for you. You stated that everyone you presented the plans to liked them when you were asked the question earlier about the keeping within the historic district. To whom have you presented plans within this township?
Well, we presented to the, I believe it's called the Architectural Review Board, I'm not.
No, it was called
Historic Preservation, okay.
And it was also the Environmental Commission we went to.
And there were some comments. One person wanted the roof more articulated than what we had, but generally they were happy with what we presented to them, both in terms of renderings and the plans. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And this is an approximate 29,000 square foot property, right? The two buildings?
No, the buildings, the gross floor area of the two buildings is like 84,000 square feet.
Okay, thanks. So,
Right.
84,000, 29,000 square feet. All right, so have you ever built or presented a project of this nature in another historic township district?
I've done landmark buildings. We do so much work. I've been doing a lot of this.
Can't remember it all.
I really can't remember. Yeah.
So a building of this size, you don't remember having done you just don't remember having.
I really don't. We've dealt with historic commissions. I've dealt with SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, on projects. We've dealt with New York City Landmarks Commission. It's a part of an architect's practice.
Sure, to present, but a building such as this.
I would have to go through my portfolio. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're finished with this witness.
Can you
and-
close the public portion with respect to
Yes,
this?
I will definitely close this at this time.
All right,
Want to go move forward?
all right, I'm going to start with my traffic expert.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Paragoy.
Raise your right hand, swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
State your full name for the record, please, and spell your last name.
Sure, my name is Craig, C-R-A-I-G, Paragoy, P-E-R-E-G-O-Y.
Mr. Paragoy, with whom are you employed?
Dynamic Traffic.
And can you provide the board with your educational and professional background, please?
Sure, I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Virginia Tech. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, testified on hundreds of occasions in front of other boards throughout the state. I pretty much do this every night. Been working as a traffic engineer for almost 20 years now.
All right, and Madam Chair, I'd like his qualification as a traffic expert to be accepted by the board unless there's any objection.
Okay,
No objection, I know he works every night of the week.
good, thank you.
Except Friday.
Except Friday.
Except Friday.
Mr. Paragoy, did you prepare the traffic impact study for this site?
I did.
And what was analyzed as part of your study?
We took a look at the two signalized intersections on either side of the site along Lamington Road, Route 206 to the west and 202 and Hillside to the east. They're both four-leg signalized intersections.
Can you just summarize the conclusions or analyze your study with respect to traffic as it relates to this site?
Sure. What we do to start for a traffic study is pick up traffic counts, again, looking at those two intersections. And what we're trying to do is isolate the busiest hours of the day. So in this case, where you'd see a residential building at its busiest and the roadways at its busiest would be the weekday, morning and evening rush hour time periods. So we took our traffic counts between 7 and 9 on a weekday morning and between 4:30 and 6:30 evening. And what we do is isolate the one busiest hour within those two-hour windows. And generally, that's going to be when you have your highest traffic volumes on the roadway. And what we'll then assume is that our project generates its highest traffic volumes at the same time. So we're looking at the absolute worst-case scenario. Just to give you a little idea, a little flavor of the magnitude of the volumes out there, Lamington Road, two-way volumes are about 600 cars per hour in those peak hours. Hillside Road's very quiet, less than 100 vehicles per hour. And Route 202, Route 202 is the northbound approach and the westbound approach of that eastern signal is about 1,200 vehicles per hour, and Route 206, by far the busiest of any of those roads, is on the order of 2,500 vehicles per hour, two-way. So it just gives you an idea of the magnitude, how much lighter traffic there is on Lamington versus 202 and 206. Next, what we need to do is project how much traffic the project's going to generate. Again, I'm looking at the peak time period of this site generating its peak traffic at the exact same time as the peak of the road generating its traffic. And we figure out the peak hour traffic or the site-generated traffic by consulting the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE's trip generation manual. You've probably heard other traffic engineers explain that to you. It's really the best means out there to determine how much traffic something's going to generate. And in this case, we're looking at the 40 residential units and 4,000 square feet of a generic commercial space. So we used the ITE's projections for a shopping center because we're just looking at a generic retail at this point. What ITE data tells me is that during those peak hours, we'll generate a maximum, with these 40 units and the 4,000 square feet, a maximum of about 68 trips. Now, New Jersey DOT and the ITE generally consider 100 or more peak hour trips to be a significant increase in traffic. So we're 2/3 of where that threshold of significance is. So this is not a heavy traffic generator. This is not a use that's going to generate a substantial amount of traffic volume. You wouldn't expect it to have a significant impact on the roads. Again, New Jersey DOT wouldn't even make us take a look at the traffic study that we did here based on the volumes that this would generate. Another thing to consider is that I'm adding the numbers on top. I'm saying, here's how much 4,000 square feet of commercial space generates, here's how much the apartments generate, and saying that all goes in and out on the road. Realistically, you're going to have some component of internal. That commercial use is going to serve the residents who live there. So obviously, somebody's not going to get in their car who live in this complex and drive to the commercial use. They're just going to walk there. So that's going to take that number down a little bit. But again, I just took the straight addition of the two, and that peak on peak time period.
So you afforded no credit to the users of the renters using the retail space.
Exactly right.
You were more conservative.
I assumed it was two separate things that acted independently, operated independently. So then what we do is sort of look into a crystal ball, look into the future. How much is traffic going to grow here in the next couple of years while this project's under construction? And I'm able to determine that there's a New Jersey DOT publishes rates for background traffic growth. For this area, I believe it was 1.75% per year. Now, if I look at my traffic count volumes that I got, and I look at the historical traffic numbers that the DOT publishes as far back as 2012, there hasn't been that much traffic growth. It's been pretty stagnant. It's about the same. So again, that's another layer of conservativeness of looking at a worst case scenario. By having that growth rate, I have my base volumes in the future. That's the no build scenario. If we don't build this project, that's what you're going to see. Then I add those ITE numbers that I projected onto that. That's the build scenario, and I make a comparison of the two. The way we assess the quality of traffic flow is by doing a capacity analysis. It's basically, we use a computer software that takes a look at the traffic signal timing, the volumes, lane widths, turning movements. We input all the data, and it tells me how much delay per vehicle for each of these movements is being created and how much overall delay per vehicle. The ranges of those delays are then related to a level of service. A is the best level of service or the least delay. F is the worst level of service. That's how we sort of quantify the operation of an intersection. In this case, both those intersections operate acceptable levels of service during the peak hours. But I think the key thing, there are some movements that are in the level of service E range, some that are in the A range. But if you look at the overall intersection, they both operate at good levels of service. But I think the key thing to take away is when I look at that no build versus that build scenario, not one single turning movement at either of those intersections changes in level of service. So there's enough capacity to handle, again, this insignificant volume of traffic that this is going to generate.
The intersections you're referring to are what?
Are Route 206 and Lamington Road and Route 202 Ash Hillside and Lamington Road.
You're basically saying the levels of service, even with this project and projected 1.75% growth, will not affect the levels of service of any of those intersections.
Exactly right. There's enough capacity to handle this small bit of volume. Again, I remember I said 68 trips is the maximum in the peak hour. That compares to 2,500 cars per hour on 206. So you get an idea of the magnitude that we're talking about. This is not a significant traffic generator. It's a small retail. It's probably going to generate less than I even projected because this is not going to be a ground floor retail like this. We have to drive around to the back of the building. Is not going to be a very high traffic generator type of use. It's going to be more of a mom and pop type of use. I looked at it as a shopping center. So I think I'm pretty conservative in the numbers. I also want to point out that, you know, in this zone, there are other uses that are permitted that would be higher traffic generators. Restaurants are permitted, medical office buildings are permitted, office buildings are permitted. There's certain different types of retail that are permitted. There's some restrictions on the sizes and the number of buildings and things like that, but there's certainly the ability to put, I think a medical office would be the best example of something that would generate substantially more traffic than what we're proposing here as a permitted use. So In terms of traffic impact, I understand all the discussion before about the variances, but in terms of traffic impact, this fits nicely in this zone, I think, as a lower generator than some of the other things that you could be putting here as of right. We're meeting the parking requirement. I think that was already discussed with Mr. George.
Let's
so we'll
talk
go through
about
that,
that intersection where people leave this or enter this site and leave this site. There was some discussion at the first hearing about the queuing of vehicles from Lamington, the intersection of Lamington and 202, 206, back to this site. You did an analysis of that quote queuing analysis, did you not?
Yes, and I should have mentioned actually that driveway is calculated to operate at level service B, so with very minimal delay, but that doesn't take into account if that driveway were blocked by queuing. So we did take a look, and your traffic engineer pointed it out as well. We took a look at what's called the 95th percentile queue that we're able to calculate with this software. In other words, 95% of the time, that queue will extend to this point. 5% of the time, it might go farther. That doesn't mean it's 95% of the time 5% of the time it's there. It just means that's how long the longest queue would extend, and that number calculates to 392 feet. So about 16 cars. Our driveway is 420 feet from that intersection. So the 95th percentile queue, probably pretty much the worst case that you'd see, what you would typically design to when you design turn lanes and things like that, does not extend to as far as our driveway location. So it would very rarely would the driveway be blocked. And again, with such low traffic volume, at any point there was an extended queue for a small period of time, it's just a matter of time before that queue clears out and you're able to leave. And it would only impact left-turning vehicles. Obviously, the right turn is not an issue. The queue from 206 does not get to the driveway location.
So in common parlance, that means that intersection will essentially not be blocked.
Blocked. I say never, because obviously things happen at any location, but based on all the information that we have, based on the analysis we can perform, it would be very rarely blocked, and that driveway is in a good location between those two intersections to function efficiently.
Let's talk about internal circulation. Do you think that this site was designed in accordance with proper traffic engineering standards with respect to internal circulation?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of times you'll see a residential building where there's just parking beneath it and that's it. We've got a mix of surface and assigned parking, which is great for the commercial spaces. They'll be able to use some of the parking spaces. That cul-de-sac or turnaround, it's sort of looks like a roundabout with the landscaping in the middle, but it's a cul-de-sac that the RSIS would require, so vehicles can come in and turn around. So that's a really good feature. Perfect spot for Amazon deliveries and FedEx trucks to stage. It really is a very efficient layout from a traffic perspective.
So it's safe and efficient, correct?
Yes.
That's your opinion as a traffic expert?
Yes, absolutely.
And the spaces are compliant with the township's sizing requirement, 9 by 18?
Correct.
And is it your professional opinion that the internal circulation has been designed to provide for the efficient movement of vehicles in and out of the site?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
All right, and you've had an opportunity to review Mr. Olivo's report, have you not?
I have.
And generally, he accepts most of the conclusions in your report, does he not?
Yes.
And some of them require some response, and if you could just briefly go through those things that require a response, I would appreciate it.
For the
His
record,
report
could
dated
you,
August 7, 2019.
Okay.
In particular, item number 6, he says testimony should be provided as to whether there are any known retail tenants. Not at this time, correct?
And we do not know at this time.
Number 9 talks about levels of service are acceptable. However, the analysis results do not consider the effects of queuing from the adjacent signals. You've talked about this 95% queuing.
Yes.
So have you spoken with Mr. Olivo about that?
I spoke with his associate at the last meeting about that, yes.
And your argument is that it'll be highly unlikely that will ever present a problem?
Yes, based on the results of our analysis, it would be unlikely, yes.
In number 10, testimony should be provided regarding queuing that occurs at the signalized intersection. Isn't that the same question?
Same, yes.
And then number 11 is, it says testimony should be provided regarding the existing and future traffic conditions at the intersection. You've testified to that already.
Yes.
Number 12, he says for the proposed development that equates to 96.2 required parking spaces, the site would provide 100 parking spaces. That's not totally accurate, it's 99.
It's 99 parking spaces. We
Okay.
counted an extra one that's not a space. We counted an extra one that's not actually a space. So we're at 99.
Number 14, testimony should be provided as to whether any of the parking spaces would be assigned for residential tenants. Can you respond?
Yes, the spaces underneath the buildings would be assigned to residential tenants. That's a dead-end parking situation, so you don't want somebody roaming in there and they don't have a spot and have to turn around and get it. So if you're pulling in, you're not in your spot, so you know it's going to be available to you.
Number 16 recognized something that we recognized early on, which was that one space really should be eliminated. It's really not a parking space. So that's what brings us down to 99, correct?
Correct.
The number 18, he characterizes that area, that circular area, as a roundabout, but for RSIS purposes, it's really a cul-de-sac, is it not?
Yes, that's the intent. RSIS requires a 40-foot diameter, 40-foot radius, I guess it is, cul-de-sac, which is what that is. There's a landscape island in the middle that's more decorative than anything else. Sort of makes it seem like a roundabout, and if you think about a roundabout, the circulating traffic has the right of way, and you have to yield to them to enter. We have it sort of the opposite, but I think we have the movements that are going to be the most used, not having to stop. I think practically it's better this way. Doesn't really matter either way, but it's not really roundabout. It's a cul-de-sac with a decorative island in the middle.
Talk about loading and unloading, both for the residential and for the non-residential. Do you think that the design allows for unloading and loading in an efficient way?
Yeah, I think the cul-de-sac is wide enough, the circulation around the cul-de-sac is wide enough that a box truck, a FedEx truck, UPS, a delivery vehicle would be able to pull to the curb and not interrupt traffic flow around that circle, and I think that's a good feature that this has. When it comes to the same thing for the commercial deliveries, when it comes to move in and move out, a lot of times they're using a U-Haul or a van, and they'll just use a parking space and not have to take up that space. But typically with buildings like this, if somebody has a larger vehicle, again, not a tractor trailer, but if you have a larger vehicle that won't fit in a space and you're going to need to be there for a long time to move in and move out, you'd schedule that with the management. They could cone off some parking spaces in mid-morning, mid-afternoon, when there's going to be plenty of availability. So you don't have long-term loading in that cul-de-sac. It would just be, like, again, like I said, the FedEx guy or somebody dropping off delivery for the commercial.
Mr. Lebo asks that fire truck circulation plan turning template analysis.
Yes, we've ran the fire truck through and it works, and we can provide that.
Right, so it's your testimony that it functions.
Yes, we have to make that happen.
He asked for testimony regarding the location of where vehicles delivering UPS, USPS, FedEx, and Amazon will park.
Yeah, and I think that cul-de-sac is a great step for that.
Can you point that out with the pointer on that
I can.
rendering?
Right at the bottom down here, I think they could stay really anywhere around the outside of the circle, but right at the bottom by the sidewalk. I think would be a good spot, and it would not interrupt traffic circulating around.
And lastly, he asks that whether at number 26, site triangles at the proposed driveway are shown on the site plan in accordance with Somerset County requirements. A 3-foot tall retaining wall is proposed along Lamington Road. Frontage testimony should be provided regarding the line of sight for motorists exiting the property.
Yes, and we will make sure that there's adequate visibility. That wall is designed such that there is. It's a county road, so they're going to have some input on this as well, so there may be some changes to that, but we're obviously have to make sure that there's safe and adequate sight distance.
So in summary, it's your opinion that this site is well suited for the proposed development and will not create an adverse traffic impact?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Olivia, do you have anything else you want to add to this?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Has there been an application to the county made and comments received, even a pre-application rather than a formal application?
There was an application to the county. We've recently got comments, and there was nothing substantial in there that I'm aware of, but we're going through them now, so.
How does the proposed driveway align with the driveways across the street?
It's somewhat offset from a fairly low volume driveway. There's a number of driveways across the street. The higher volume driveways, I would say, would be the post office side. We're more towards the middle, so it does not line up directly across, but I think with the low volumes that we're generating and the low volumes from across the street, I don't see that being an issue.
Do you have a sense of how far those driveways are away, even approximately?
I think I can probably help you with that.
Just while you're looking into that,
Throw a paper clip across them.
what I would ask that you provide some testimony about is left-turning vehicles into the site driveway. Those vehicles that are staged to make a left turn, waiting for a gap in traffic to turn into the site driveway, will they be impeding the flow of vehicles behind them, or is there enough width in that half width of them to those traffic?
That half, it depends. It's most likely they would be impeding them. You have about 15 feet there, so if somebody hugged the double yellow line to make that left in, you might be able to pass them, but more than likely, they'll be impeding that through traffic for that second or two that they're waiting to make their left turn. And that's level service A, that left turn.
Right, so you've analyzed that in level of service analysis, and again, what was the level of service and what was the delay?
Level service A for that left turn in,
Which is the highest level.
which is the least delay. The actual seconds of delay, you'll have to give me a second to look it up. Around 8 seconds
8 seconds.
per vehicle.
And if I'm looking at the right figure 4 indicates that 4 vehicles would be expected to make that turn in the morning peak hour and 23 in the evening peak hour.
Yes, more in the evening, obviously people are coming home from work, so there's more entering traffic.
I just want to ask the question, if this were an office building site, there would be much more intense movement, correct? It would be more substantial.
Yes,
So-
absolutely, yes.
So let's put things in perspective. It's 2 vehicles in the peak hour with this use, correct? In the morning peak.
It's 4 left in the morning peak. If it were an office, it would be the opposite. There'd be more left in the morning and more out in the evening. And the county doesn't ask for they've accepted that geometry as far as I understand. They have not asked for any turn lanes or anything
They have
like
not
that.
asked for a dedicated left turn movement.
No.
Understood. Can you just explain the control of the cul-de-sac or the roundabout, whatever you want to call it? Where's the control? Where are the stop controls? Is it yield controls?
We have free flow movement in to the building and then a stop control internal inside the roundabout for anybody who is making a U-turn, like somebody who left and said, oh, I forgot my phone and had to go back. So you're going to have very few movements doing that. So that's why we thought that was the appropriate movement to stop. Although it's not necessarily a traditional way you would handle a roundabout, I think it's made more sense in this particular case because you know that that is going to be the least performed move on site.
Okay, there's adequate width to stage a temporary loading vehicle in that southerly portion of the roundabout and for a vehicle to pass, correct?
Yes.
How wide is that?
It's 24 feet, so it's 2 full lanes width around that cul-de-sac.
And understanding that retail tenant or tenants, they have not been identified at this stage. If there were to be a small restaurant or cafe within the retail building, can you give us a sense of the difference in trip generation from what you have for a generic shopping center. I don't disagree with what you use to calculate the trip generation, but I was curious if there were a small restaurant, what kind of delta in trip generation?
And keep in mind that if there were a restaurant in there, it would be limited based on the parking. If they came back for a parking variance, in which case we'd obviously address the traffic as well. Your requirement for parking for restaurants is based on seats, so however many seats, it would depend on the operation that was in there. But if I look at the square footage of a quality restaurant or a restaurant space, it would generate 19 trips lower in the evening peak hour than the shopping center and 1 trip lower in the morning peak hour than the shopping center. The only instance where a restaurant would generate more traffic would be if it was what's called a high turnover restaurant, TGI Fridays, Applebee's, something like that. I don't think that makes sense in this location, but even that type of use would be 11 trips less in the evening peak hour, but 26 more in the morning, I guess, if it was an IHOP, where it'd be busy in the morning. So it's variable depending on the use, but I don't think significantly. I think the numbers that we use are a pretty good representation.
Madam Chair, those are all the questions that I have. I would just restate some of the comments within our report. I do agree with the methodology that has been used with regard to the data collection at both signalized intersections. I recognize the queue analysis as certainly being valid and in accordance with industry standards. I would also agree that when looking at the totality of this development, this is considered to be a low generator of traffic. The amount of traffic generation would not be expected to alter levels of service or delay within the area, and the parking that's being provided would be sufficient to accommodate that.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open up to the board. Board, any questions?
The proposed driveway is roughly equidistant between the two traffic lanes?
It's closer to 202.
Closer to Hillside?
Yeah, closer to Hillside. It's about 420 feet from the stop bar at Hillside, and it's 720 feet from the stop bar at 206.
And I'm sorry, don't recall, did you say that the traffic and the queuing was more problematic at 202 or 206?
The 95th percentile queue length calculated is longer, is closer, not longer, I should say. It's closer to the driveway from 202. But in my personal experience, 206, every once in a while, you do get a really long queue there.
That's
And
my
it's
personal
it's not as
experience. I live in
consistent.
the neighborhood, yes.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
consistent. It's consistently maybe 10 cars at 202, like every single cycle. At 206, sometimes there's none, and sometimes it's backed up for, a pretty good distance.
that's-
Never to this driveway
So the problems
location,
that
that's
you
700
identified,
feet.
or you're trying to address, or saying are not, maybe not a problem, Mr. Olia, are model problems or practical problems based on your observations and measurements?
Well, they're both. Most of the time, I have to rely more on the modeled problems and the computer software, but I happen to drive through the 206 Lamington intersection twice a day, every single day, so I'm very familiar with the area, and obviously I've paid a little bit more attention since this application's come along, so both the modeling and my personal experience are part of my testimony.
And from experience, the time frame to get through 206 east to west is very short.
Yep, 25 vehicles per hour. They need a lot of green
So
time.
when you have a queue, sometimes 4 or 5 cars and the lights changed, right?
Yep.
And so because of the distance, you don't believe queuing will become a problem to that driveway any than the most extreme
No, like I said,
times a day?
we're 700 feet. I mean, you're talking about, 28 to 30 car queue. I've never seen it get to that extent. But I do agree, it is random. It's fairly consistent from the other direction, but towards 206, sometimes there's 2 cars there and sometimes there's 15. It's more random, in my experience.
And while our consultant has kind of accepted some of your exceptions, I'm just, some of your assumptions, but just questioning, you have 40 units. Don't 40 people go to work between 7 and 9 o'clock? Or are you taking into account people working at home and some of modern trends to get to those numbers?
I'm looking at,
In my
probably more than
neighborhood,
40 people.
90% of the people are going to work between 7 and 9 o'clock.
It's probably more than 40% of the people, well, I mean, more than 40 people going to work, you know, could be households with more than one worker, but they're spread out over a long time period. I'm looking at the busiest 1 hour. So that's why the numbers aren't, if you said how many people are going to leave here between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., it's probably 45 cars, but the busiest 1 hour in there is what I'm trying to focus on. Right. And if you look, in fact, I have this information, because I always get that question. The census publishes the time leaving home to go to work based on census data, and in Bedminster, the busiest 1 hour, it's 35%. So about 1/3 of the people who are going to leave here, you would think would leave in the one busiest hour. Some people work from home, some people carpool. There's other factors.
So, and we talked about the alternate uses, so if somebody came in with 100% compliant Starbucks, we'd have a much bigger problem.
Starbucks would be a much bigger traffic generator than this, there's no question.
Done?
No.
I'm sorry.
I'm not. Sorry. So when you went from the 100 to the 99 because the 7.5-foot spot was disqualified, previous testimony was that we figured out a way to add another spot in the garage in the west building. Did we get back up to 100 when we do that?
Yeah, I don't think Craig was aware
We did.
of that.
So
I am now, he's nodding.
We're back up to 100 for practical purpose. Okay. Any discussion about all right, so my understanding, all right, so the way this is going to function practically, people are sleeping overnight, all the cars are parked, lots full overnight, morning people start to go to work, and during the day, we start to see activity for this potential retail operation. Those are kind of mutually exclusive kind of parking patterns to some degree.
Yes, a shared parking scenario would be ideal, depends on the user, of course, but would be
So
ideal.
that confluence of those parking needs don't overlap? I'm asking if they're mutually exclusive. They don't overlap at all?
Again, it depends on who goes in it. We have enough parking, just the summation of the requirement for the retail plus the requirement for the residential. So there isn't necessarily the need for any shared parking. We have enough. But like you're saying, the daytime is when the commercial use is going to be more active when people are out at work. So there'll be more parking available in the daytime and vice versa at night. The commercial space will be closed. Its parking could be used for the residential.
So but potentially another restriction on the retail uses would be not a retail use that would require evening parking.
Well, we have enough parking for both of them to be at their max capacity at the same time. Yes, we have enough parking if you do the straight summation, assuming it's retail. Like I said, if it's a restaurant, we need to count the seats and see what they need. And then maybe that scenario does come into play. If it's a user
So
that
that,
needs
in
more
that
parking.
application, would it be
Right.
considered independently? I get it.
Exactly.
That's all the questions.
Okay. I'll open it up to the public. Anybody have any questions? Come on. Yes, Lou?
You want to go, Mr. Gallo?
Yeah, I'm going to let them go first this time.
Okay. Yes?
Louis D. Javine, 2460 Limington Road. I was sworn in.
Still under it.
Okay, just some reference points there. My office, my physical therapy center is Caddy Corner across the street, and I've been there for 12 years.
This one.
This is us right here.
That's okay.
So I've been there for 12 years, and for the last 6 years, worked there every single day. So even though we have two traffic experts here, I think that maybe I can tell you a little bit more about the practical aspect that Mr. Travellini was asking me about. So I want to go through some things, and I'd like you to slow down a little bit so that we can understand. Your presentation was actually quite quick. So the question I asked from you is, you talked about the Department of Transportation, I guess, requirements or data or statistics. And when you talked about that, it was in reference to Route 202 and Route 206?
No, it's the statewide, the New Jersey DOT statewide, if you are not if you're not working on their highway and you're not adding more than 100 trips, they don't care. You don't need a permit.
Is that on a state highway road?
That's for state highways, yeah, New Jersey
Yes.
DOT. We're not on a state highway, no, we're
We're
on a
not on
county
a state
road.
highway, so they consider under one, if I get you correct, they consider under 100 trips in and out of the driveway insignificant?
Correct.
but this is not a state highway.
No,
This is county road.
correct.
And so that reference doesn't apply.
Well, the IE also uses that 100 trip threshold and considers it the same thing. It's
Okay, and what does IT
generally
stand for?
Institute of Transportation Engineers.
Okay, and is it applied for a two-lane road, like this, a two-lane street with the yellow, double yellow line between it?
Yes, generally less than
All
100
right,
trips does not impact.
so really what I'm trying to understand is I wanted to make sure that the comparisons that you're making are apples to apples, not 206 to Lamington Road, because obviously 206 is a four-lane highway, and Lamington Road is a two-lane county street, in a sense. You did your analysis based on theoretical, models that come with numbers, is that correct?
We took actual traffic counts, so we have the local data. Projections are based on research traffic counts taken throughout the country at other similar developments.
So you used actual traffic counts, but then you use that data to put into some formula as
Exactly.
some standard is created.
Yes, yes, and I use the actual timing of these traffic signals, the width of the lanes, the number of lanes, so it's a representative of exactly what's out here.
The reason I ask is I want to understand that. I think I would like to ask you, your driveway is 400 feet from
About
the Hillside Avenue
stop,
intersection?
about 420, yeah.
420 feet, and according to your formulas, the queuing should add up to 360 feet?
The 95th percentile queue is 392, so about
392.
16 cars.
Okay, so you should come in about 25 feet approximately before you get to your driveway.
Correct.
In a perfect situation, in clear weather, does the formula account for rain, snow, ice, or anything else?
No, that wouldn't.
Okay. And the other question I would have then is, would you say that turning left onto in that queue might be challenging if it was longer and passes your driveway?
Turning left out of our site?
Yes.
Yeah, you'd have to wait for that queue to clear,
Okay.
or make a right and go a different way.
And also, just from a kind of an overview, your driveway is just a tiny bit west of a residential driveway across the street,
Yes.
and then a little bit further west of my office driveways.
Your inbound driveway, yes.
All right. And then the other question I had is the 68, you said you generate 68 exits and entrances?
68, a trip is a car either entering or exiting, 68 trips.
Okay, and that's during what hour? Is that during a specific hour or generally during that morning rush hour?
That's 68 is the evening, that's the busiest, is the PM
The
rush
PM.
hour time period, yes.
Okay.
And here, the PM peak hour with the day we did the counts was 4:45 to 5:45 PM.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. I just wanted to clarify because, like I said, I wanted to make sure we understood how you got to your numbers.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what do you need to do?
Louis D. Javine.
Anyone else?
Jesse Rika, 446 Main Street. I'll keep it brief, I know it's late. Whose job is it to make sure the cars are parking in the correct spaces?
And on the site, I assume the building management.
Building management, and is that the same for people who are parking for the apartment and for people who are parking in retail?
Yes, I would just, yeah, of course.
Whose job was it to make sure that the right size trucks are unloading furniture? We talked earlier about how a tractor trailer can't fit. Whose job is it to make sure that the right size box truck is unloading?
Well, that's a management thing. I think the testimony before was that it would be written into the leases that you couldn't bring a tractor trailer to move in.
And whose job is it to enforce that?
The building management, the building.
And is that Elite Properties?
It is. Why did you do that question?
Is that Elite Properties?
It is, yes.
So Elite Properties' responsibility to make sure the right vehicles are parking in the right spaces and that The UPS trucks, the FedEx trucks are parking in the right spot on the property to unload and load, and that the retailers who are getting their inventory are parked all in the correct spot. And so is there someone at Elite Properties there 24/7 to make sure that these things are happening?
Well, there's a building superintendent to monitor those types of things. If it becomes problematic, then I'm sure there'd be more people there. I mean, this is millions of dollars they're investing, and they want it to work properly. They don't want people parking improperly or deliveries causing problems. So they have a very vested interest in making sure that it works properly. And it's designed to do so, but it's up to them to enforce any of those issues.
And so what would be the repercussions if they're not being done correctly?
Carol, can this person speak to operations?
Yeah, I think this should be operations, not
Oh, there's
the
another
traffic.
witness that's better. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes,
All right, thank you for that.
absolutely.
Okay, is there an overflow parking lot for people who have more than one vehicle and/or they're having a social event during the holidays or Super Bowl or something similar?
Yeah, the parking requirements for the residential take into account, some people may have more than one car, they take into account visitor parking, that's all accounted for within the number that we're providing.
And you suggested earlier that fire trucks, you did a study to make sure large fire trucks, as an example, can fit on that?
Yes.
How many fire trucks in the event that was an emergency, how many could actually fit there, assuming that all the spaces are full?
How many fire trucks?
Yes.
I mean, it's a 50-foot long truck, 60-foot long truck, maybe 8, 9, or more than would
So
be
you're
needed.
suggesting this driveway from the right side on the back to the left side is 400 feet long?
Sure, you could, I mean, if you could stack fire trucks all the way through here. Would be necessary.
All right, so the widths allow for wide trucks and long trucks, that's what you're stating?
Yes.
Thank you. How many cars will make it through the traffic light headed north on 202? So it's actually, if you made a left out of the property onto Lamington toward the intersection of Somerville, how many cars can make it through the traffic light before it cycles through red?
Per cycle, I don't know, I couldn't tell you that answer. I can tell you how many cars make it through in an hour based on what we counted.
Okay, but not in any, well, so the actual question then would be, does the timing of the traffic light need to be adjusted?
It does not. There's
And that
enough
was part of your study?
It was part of the study, yes. We have the timing directive that is being used from the county and from DOT.
That's it, thank you.
No new witnesses.
Nate?
Yes, please.
Andrew
Name.
Isaacs.
Mhm.
Just a few quick questions. When was the study, when was your study conducted?
We took our traffic counts, I got to get right here, in May of 2019, school's in.
When in May?
May 15th, Wednesday, May
does-
15th, and again, I compare them to DOT counts from as far back as 2012, so.
Does that time, someone else had a question earlier, right? Was the weather good and clear?
Yes.
So is there an impact, let's say, in different times of the year on traffic? Right. So does when you did this study have any influence or impact on the flow?
Yeah, I'd say generally in the summertime, in the morning, you might be missing that school traffic, so we try not to have to count in the summertime when schools are out of session. Doesn't so much matter in the evening, but in the morning, it could make a difference.
Okay, thanks. And related to that comment, if there are, I think 40 residents in that development, right? And did you take into account people with children, school buses, the impact on traffic that would have?
The data that we use is based on traffic counts of similar types of developments, where people have school buses pull in, and they have children, and they get their refrigerators delivered, so
In
that's
an
all accounted
aggregate,
for.
But I guess specifically, when you do your analysis, I know you had 6-8 trips and so forth. You know, we have a lot of kids in our little cul-de-sac, and I just can't imagine, let's say, 40 units. I'm just, when you do the analysis, do you take into account that there might be 40 kids living in that place, right? And has that impact the traffic from a school?
I've asked two questions. You've made an assumption that there will be 40 children. Can you answer that first?
The planner will be able to tell you how many children will be living here. I can tell you it's not going to be 40, but I'll leave that testimony. Yes, obviously, if there's children, there may be a school bus stop. That impacts traffic for the 30 seconds it's stopped there. It's not something that's going to substantially change anything,
And does the
unless
school
you're right
bus-
behind it.
Does the school bus, would that be on the street, or would that actually go into the development?
I believe the schools could, if the fire truck could, it could go into development. That will be up to the Board of Education. They usually don't go into private developments in a lot of towns, but maybe they would. I don't know.
And when you were also doing this, did you take into account the other planned retail, commercial additional traffic by the proposed commercial retail, like a bakery is supposed to go in right next to this property? Did you take that into account?
No, there's nothing substantial that's been approved in this area that we were told about.
Okay.
A bakery wouldn't make a big.
But you did or did
difference.
not take that into account?
No, we did not take a bakery into account.
And
We
what's-
added that growth rate, that conservative growth
I
rate, to
understand
take
that.
into account things like that, small things, but there's nothing substantial.
And were you asked to conduct a traffic study that would not have required any variances so that we could compare the delta, like the difference between what would be expected without the variances versus the variance for these 100 parking spots?
I did not study that, but I did point out that there are uses that would not require a variance that generate more traffic than what we're proposing. So it's theoretical that an right use could have more of an impact on this.
But did you do that study?
We did not do the analysis, no.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Raggedy Fairview Drive on Elmstone Road. Thank you. The 68 trips generated from the project site. I didn't hear the number of just the existing Langton Road only trips. You were talking about 2,500 on 206. That's really not.
It's about 600, ballpark 600 two-way volume on Lamington Road, with most of it heading east in the morning and heading west in the evening.
So 68, it's fair to say, is about 10% more than 600. A little more than 10% more than 600.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the 1.7%, was it, general growth rate?
1.75%.
1.75%. So if every township hypothetically were to grant ordinances, variances, or change ordinances and change zoning, increase trips by 10% for some property, and we'll ignore the bakery, but 1.75 potentially, in your opinion, would that have possibly, would we see that change in years to come?
No, that 1.75 is based on historical traffic recording, traffic volume growth. It's not a micro-analysis of each individual property. And not every variance adds traffic. In this case, we're asking for a variance that's going to generate less traffic than what we could otherwise do.
You believe this use will generate less traffic than permitted uses?
Yes, there are permitted uses in the zone that could generate more traffic.
And permitted uses, I am going to defer to the planner. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go right ahead.
Just want to commend the public, they did good. They asked some of the questions I would have asked. Dennis Galvin, represented Tannenbaums and Ms. Thomas. The length of the queue, you said on Lamington Road to be 395 feet?
390, the calculated 95th percentile queue is 392, and you usually use that for design purposes.
So how many cars would that be? You said 16?
16, 17, 18, depending on how tight they stack.
And the distance to the driveway is 420 feet?
420.
So one or two more cars and we block the driveway?
One more car would be right out the driveway, the second car would block it, yes.
That could happen, right?
It's a, again, that 95th percentile is a percentile. On occasion, it could happen, but you typically design to what's close to a worst-case scenario, which is what that number is, what that 95th percentile is.
And you've talked to us about the deliveries for the stores. You
Yes.
said, hey, it's going to be box trucks, we're going to put it in leases, but human nature being what it is, someone may receive a delivery from the tractor trailer. What would happen?
I'm going to have someone from operations talk about that.
Well, I think it's a traffic question. I want to know what the impact's going to be on Lamington Road.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Trying to be quick and keep it short so we can all go home. Just answer my question and I'll get through it.
If a tractor trailer pulled into the site, it could not turn around. It would have to back out onto
So
the
the
road.
dummy's going to figure out he can't do that, and his next option's going to be to park on Lamington Road to offload his stuff.
Yes, that would be the only possible way to achieve offloading and stuff, would be to park on the
And how bad will that be for Lamington Road?
It would depend when he did it. If he did it in the middle of the day, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. You know, I mean, so, like the other guy from the public mentioned, the school buses stop in rush hour time periods on Route 206, stopping both directions of traffic. It's a temporary interruption, but I don't see it as
Is there going to be
chronic.
Is there going to be parking on Lamington Road?
No.
Okay. I have no further questions of this witness.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, come up, please.
You sworn last time? Yes. All right, you swear any testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
State your full name for the record, your address, and spell your last name, please.
Deborah Taglieri, Taglieri.
I'm not saying you're short, but
That's it. 71 Wendover Court, Bedminster. And only because you mentioned a crystal ball and projecting for the future, my crystal ball tells me that the neighboring town is considering putting 134 units just down the road, a couple miles down the road, right on 202. So there would be an impact from that.
Certainly there would be some. I mean, it's far enough away that it would be dispersed and diluted, and is probably more than accounted for in the 1.75% growth that is bumping those numbers up.
Okay, and is there any possibility that, I mean, I know when I moved here, it took me about 6 months to find my back roads, to avoid 202 and 206 and all of that.
Oh, what are you talking about?
No. See, I live in the hills in Bedminster and I work in Far Hills, so I know how to get around it. So what would be the impact to some of those back roads, like Liberty Corner and...
From this project?
Yeah.
Oh, very little. I mean, we're talking about right at our driveway, where all traffic is going to be concentrated, there's no impact. And then you split it in two different directions. Some goes towards 206, some goes towards 202. From there, they split into three more directions. So by the time you've diluted that volume down to some of the back roads, it's very little.
You said you're familiar with the area. Have you tried to make a left at the train tracks onto 202 at rush hour in the evening?
Probably not.
No, you don't want to. So if they found that as their back roads, then that stacks up big back there. So that would impact.
And from this, maybe be talking one or two cars, it wouldn't really change it.
If you travel it every day, it would change it. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, I think that's it for tonight.
Can we just
Mr. Lear?
close the public portion on the traffic?
Yes, close the public portion, yes. Mhm.
I will present the planner next time, and we'll answer some of the other questions that have been asked.
Okay, and Mr. Jaworski is coming back as well? Do you expect him back?
Maybe Mr. Jaworski or someone from his office.
From his office, right,
Yes.
okay. All right, yeah, just to answer those questions,
What will
okay.
be the next meeting?
I think we've scheduled the next one for the second Thursday in October?
We're looking at bringing these people back to second grade.
Second Thursday, which is, you want a date on that?
The 10th, October 10th.
October 10th?
All right, the meeting will be carried to October 10th, 2019, 7 p.m. No further notice. Mr. Lehrer, to the extent we're at that point, I doubt we are, you consent to carrying it to them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I just want to alert the board that I will be putting in a case in opposition, and we do have a plan.
Okay, all right,
I'll
yes,
try to have them ready for that next meeting.
for October 10th.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the board?
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
We're done.
Bob Rogalina.